Good evening and welcome to the November 27, 2018 regular meeting of the Troy Planning Commission. Copies of the agenda for tonight's meeting are available at the entrance to the room. Additionally, the agendas and minutes of prior meetings are available on the city's website. The meeting will be conducted in accordance with the agenda as presented or amended by the Planning Commission. The roles and responsibilities of the Planning Commission are outlined on the reverse side of tonight's agenda. State law establishes planning commissions. The commission is comprised of 9 members, all of whom have volunteered to serve. Members are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by city council. The other individuals seated at the table this evening are representatives of the city's planning department, the city attorney's office, and the city's planning consultant, Carlisle Wortman and Associates. If you wish to address the planning commission, please come forward and recognize and provide your name and address on the sign-on sheet. Please begin your remarks by stating your name for the benefit of the commissioners. All remarks are to be addressed to the Planning Commission, not to anyone else in the room. At this time, I ask that all cell phones, PDAs, or any other devices that might disrupt this meeting, please either be placed in silent mode or be turned off. The roll call, Ms. Zarnicki, please.
Mr. Aphidian?
Here.
Ms. Cruz?
Here.
Mr. Faison?
Here.
Ms. Fowler?
Here.
Mr. Hudson?
Here.
Mr. Krant?
Here.
Mr. Zanzika?
Here.
Mr. Tagle?
Here.
Quorum present. Before we move on to the second item on the agenda, Mr. Savedant would like to introduce the newest member.
Yes, I'm very happy to introduce our newest Planning Commission member, appointed last Monday by City Council, Barb Fowler. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here, and I look forward to working with all of you.
Thanks. Great. Welcome. Moving on to item number 2 on the agenda, approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda, please? Moved by Mr. Faison, seconded by Mr. Zanzika. Roll call, Ms. Zarnicki, please.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Ms. Fowler?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Mr. Zanzika?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Aphidian?
Yes. Item number 3, approval of the minutes for the November 13, 2018 meeting. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes, please?
I'll make one.
Moved by Mr. Krant and seconded by Ms. Cruz. Roll call, Ms. Zarnicki, please.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Ms. Fowler?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Mr. Zanzika?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
I'll abstain.
Mr. Aphidian?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Item number 4, public comment for items not on the agenda. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak on anything that is not on the agenda tonight? Seeing none, we move on to item number 5, conditional rezoning, public hearing, conditional rezoning and preliminary site plan review, file number CRJPLN 2018-002, proposed Sylvanwood Court condominium, west side of Rochester, north side of Sylvanwood, section 10, from R1C, one family residential district, to RT, one family attached residential district. Mr. Carlisle.
Good evening to the Planning Commission and to the public. I have a very brief presentation based upon my review of the development. I'll go through it quickly and then allow time for comments from the Planning Commission. Tonight, the request in front of you is to conditionally rezone a property located at 5395 Rochester Road from one family residential to one family attached residential. The site is located on the west side of Rochester Road at Sylvanwood Avenue, which is just south of the Sylvan Glen Golf Course. The site itself is actually 3 separate parcels. In total, they add up to about 1.2 acres. 2 of the parcels are currently vacant. 1 of the parcels has been improved with a single-family home. That single-family home would be removed as a condition of approval. The condition being offered by the applicant tonight is the site plan, which has been reviewed and was included in your packet. The site plan is shown in front of you. The applicant is asking for 10 units. Let me use this, Director Savedant. Just for orientation, this is Sylvanwood Avenue. This is Rochester Road. The 10 units are spread out in 3 units in this yellow block, 3 units in this yellow block, and 4 units in this back block. It's accessed off of Sylvanwood, and it has driveways in front of each of the units and a T turnaround at the back end of the development. It does include a detention pond, which is located in the southeast corner of the development. The development would be accessed solely from Sylvanwood. When we look at a rezoning, we consider what could be done by right versus what is being proposed by the applicant. By right, it's zoned R1C. With that being said, we estimate they could get approximately 4 single-family homes. That would be done via site condominium, which would come to the Planning Commission if that came to be. Under the proposed rezoning, they're allowed up to 10 multifamily units. The height is the same as what would be allowed under R1C, 30 feet. That's what the applicant is asking for tonight, is 30 feet. The setbacks are actually greater with the RT than what they are with the R1C. The front setback in R1C is 30, the sides of 15, and the rear 40. The applicant tonight in front of you is proposing a 52-foot setback off Sylvanwood, 25 feet off the sides, and 40 foot in the rear. In addition, the open space as allowed under R1C is greater than under RT. Under R1C, they could have up to 30% of the site covered with buildings. Under the RT zoning, they are proposing 12.5%. In regards to the zoning itself, the site is outlined in the little block in red located here. Again, they're asking for proposed RT zoning. You'll notice the outlined in yellow properties along Rochester Road. There is a scattering of RT zoning along Rochester Road, but in addition to that, there's a scattering of various different zoning designations along Rochester Road. There's not a consistent zoning pattern that really follows Rochester Road. In addition, the master plan itself calls for transitional uses and transitional zoning along Rochester Road itself. With regards to the master plan, this was looked at by the Planning Commission and adopted by the City Council within the last 2 years. And specifically, we did look at this issue of Rochester Road. The site, as I noted, is outlined here in red in this corner. The site is master planned for Rochester Road corridor. Again, the uses along Rochester Road were intended to be a varied mix of uses. When I say along Rochester Road, I'm actually talking about those parcels which actually physically front on Rochester Road. The idea is to have more intense development at the nodes, which is either the major mile intersections, so Square Lake in Rochester, Long Lake in Rochester, with more intensity at those major miles, and then filling in the gaps are lower intensity uses, such as small retail, small offices, or as proposed, a small scale multifamily. So in terms of uses itself, the application tonight does comply with the master plan. In addition, the Rochester Road calls for an innovative use of stormwater management. This is the use of bioswales, pervious paving, as well as rain gardens, and the applicant is incorporating some of those into his site plan itself. So in regards to just the master plan itself, we do find that the development does comply with the master plan. The rezoning is consistent by providing a transition from the Rochester Road arterial to the adjacent neighborhood. It's consistent with the master plan by providing land use patterns of multifamily fronting Rochester Road north of Long Lake between those more intense node developments. The low-rise multifamily does provide a lower impact use along the corridor between the more intense nodes along Rochester Square Lake and Rochester and Long Lake. And again, the rezoning is consistent with the master plan designation of the use of stormwater management best practices. One of the issues that has come up in our review and has been raised by some of the concerned neighbors is the issue of traffic. Sylvanwood, which is outlined in blue on the graphic in front of you, is a paved street. It's 22 feet in width with approximately plus or minus 53 houses that front on it. The city's traffic consultant, OHM, did a traffic review of the proposed development in front of you. And they conclude that in the morning is a 2-hour period between 7 and 9, and this constitutes 1 hour within that 2-hour period, that there would be a maximum of approximately 5 trips in the morning coming out of this development, and in the evening would be a maximum of 8 trips per day coming in and out of this unit. This is based on ITC findings, which are the International Traffic Engineering Code, and these are based on practices throughout the country in Southeast Michigan. Based on that, they anticipate that there will be an additional vehicle approximately every 7 to 8 minutes during the rush hour period, both in the morning and in the evening. And in their conclusion, they do find that the traffic impact would be minimal and would not be expected to significantly worsen the traffic conditions on Sylvanwood Drive or Rochester Road itself. With regards to the site plan itself, we do note that the site plan does comply with all the setback requirements. Just for education, The proposed development, the first building located on Rochester Road is 52 feet from the closest point on Rochester Road. It's 62 feet away from Sylvanwood, is 43 feet away from the western property line, and is 30 feet from the north or the property line to the golf course. In addition, the applicant is proposing 20 parking spaces. Those 20 parking spaces are located within 2 car garages for each unit, in addition to 10 spaces within each of the driveway, and there is 3 guest parking spaces located on the front end of the development. So in totality, there's approximately 33 spaces for the 10 units. In regards to landscape and buffering, the applicant is providing the required transitional transitional landscaping as required by the ordinance. They're proposing a 6-foot-high blue spruce evergreen planting along both the west as well as the northern property lines. In total, there's going to be 57 new spruces that we plant along those property lines. In addition, they're proposing to maintain the existing tree buffer. There's a pretty dense tree buffer along Rochester Road that they are going to maintain. And they're also preserving 2 significant maple trees which are located near the detention pond, again in the southeast corner of the site. This is how the development would look like as you're pulling in off of Sylvanwood. The 4-unit development is located in the back end of the site. These are the 3-unit buildings on each side. These are the these are the driveways, as well as you can see this is the garage. So they are 30 feet tall, they're 2.5 stories, 30 feet tall, and these are the guest parking spaces. This is the site as viewed from the corner. This would be the northeast corner of the site looking from Rochester Road into the site. Again, this is the 4-unit building in the rear of the site, the 3 units on the front of the site, and the applicant is providing a sidewalk around the perimeter of the building, as well as you can see this is the detention pond in the corner of the site. This is the elevation that would face upon the western property line or the property line that is next to the adjacent residential, as well as the elevation that would face on the golf course itself. The difference between this elevation is there's 4 units here. The other one is a 3-unit, so it would be the same design, et cetera, that fronts onto the golf course and the adjacent single-family residential. When we consider a rezoning, there are standards under which we consider. The first is the proposed rezoning consistent with the master plan? Does the rezoning cause or increase any existing nonconformity? Can the development be served with public services and facilities? Will the rezoning impact public safety, health, and welfare? And will the rezoning ensure compatibility of adjacent land use? With all that being said, we do find that the state rezoning standards have been met. The rezoning is consistent with the master plan. It provides a transition from Rochester Road. It provides a low-rise multifamily development with less impact along the corridor, as well as it includes stormwater management best practices as called from the master plan. In addition, as found by the traffic consultant of the engineer of the city, it's found that the rezoning for the multifamily would have limited impact upon traffic, as well as the applicant again has provided a dense evergreen screen along all the property lines. With that being said, we are recommending a conditional rezoning with the site plan as submitted, with the conditions that the applicant increase the sidewalk on Rochester Road to 8 feet in width, and that any recommended architectural changes from the Planning Commission should be incorporated in the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carlisle. Mr. Sabana.
Just want to add 2 things. We received a 5-page petition signed by essentially every property owner, looks like, on Sylvanwood, and we also received an email opposing the application. And secondly, what the applicant seeks this evening and what the Planning Commission has the authority for this evening is a recommendation. So the Planning Commission for this, which is a conditional rezoning application, the Planning Commission is a recommending body only. So they're not seeking nor will they receive approval this evening. If they get a positive recommendation, the next step will be going to City Council, where there will be another public hearing where ultimately City Council will decide on this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sabana. Any questions for Mr. Carlisle or Mr. Sabana from the Planning Commissioners? Mr. Tagle, did I see a hand?
No.
No. So if there are no questions at this time, then I will ask the applicant to come forward.
Thank you for having us.
Go state your name. Aaron Nicole, Representative Eureka Building.
Ernest Shire, representative of your building as well. So
Go ahead.
thank you for having us. We've had, obviously, we've been in an informal setting before the Planning Commission on prior occasion. We took a lot of the recommendations and comments that this body made, and we incorporated them in this plan. We think it's a good plan. We think it's a great transitional plan. We obviously, as you can imagine, do support all the findings that the planning consultant and planning director have incorporated with this. We're happy to address any issues, any questions or concerns that you may have, and we look forward to hopefully your recommendation for approval.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Mr. Faison.
I have just one question. Mr. Sullivan talked about the petition, so I was curious if you had gotten feedback from the neighbors as you developed this project.
We have,
I'm going to let you answer that question.
This question is for the applicant. The public will have a chance to speak on this project, and you will have a chance to speak anything you would like when the time comes. Thank you.
we have contacted the neighbors adjacent to the property on the west side of this property. We have contacted the neighbors across the street on the south side of Sylvanwood, right next, so across the street, basically the second and the third house from Rochester Road. We've discussed and showed them pretty much the concepts and discussed them the plans. And those are the properties, and also the owner off Rochester Road, which is not the house on the south west corner of Rochester and Sylvanwood, but the house south of it. Because there's a corner lot, there's a house, Green Ranch, that we took over and demolished a few months ago. It was a blight. And then the house south of it, we discussed with them as well. So basically, we've talked to 4 different neighbors.
And the feedback you got?
The feedback was positive. I mean, neighbors basically, they welcome it because of the way that property's been sitting for years. There was an older house on that property that was sitting abandoned for over 10 years. Basically, the city was making calls to have the grass cut because it wasn't getting cut from previous owners, so we took it over a couple of years ago, less than a couple of years ago, and trying to enhance it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant at this time? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So this is a public hearing, and anyone in the audience that wishes to speak on this item, you will get a chance. So I will open up the public hearing, and before we do that, I just wanted to read a few housekeeping items. A public hearing is an opportunity for residents to share their comments on a specific projects with the Planning Commission. Everyone in attendance who wishes to speak will be provided an opportunity to speak. We appreciate everyone who came out tonight to share their thoughts with the Planning Commission. Your comments are important. Before I open the public hearing, it is important to set up some ground rules so that we can have an effective and efficient public hearing. Please remember to sign in and begin your remarks and your comments by stating your name and your address in relation to this project for the public record. Please address all comments to the chair. Please be respectful of the Planning Commission, the consultants, the applicant, and those in the audience. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes, and the timer in front right here will have a yellow light turn on when you have 1 minute left. You actually have 3 minutes to speak. The yellow light turns on at 1 minute, and when the red light comes on, it indicates that your time is up. This is an opportunity for residents to provide comment. It is not a discussion or a debate. We respectfully request that you refrain from talking, clapping, or cheering during this meeting. Thank you. So at this time, I open up the public hearing. Anyone that wishes to speak, please come up and sign up. And you don't have to line up. You just, as you come up, you can sign up. 3 minutes.
Anyway, my name is, let me sign in first. I forget. printing okay? Do I have to sign my signature?
Printing's fine.
Printing's okay.
Printing is preferred, actually.
Okay, well, I'm not that great of a printer. I did grow up with cursive writing, but that's not too good. Okay, well, anyway, we moved out here. My name's Daniel Levitt, and we live at 871 Sylvanwood, which is on the north side, you know, backs up to the park and the lake. And we moved here from Harper Woods in 2010 in March. And I'm a disability examiner. My wife's a nurse, and you know, we were sick of living in a place that had lots of renters. You know, it was very close spacing. There was a lot of traffic up and down the block. And, you know, things started to change with the downturn of the economy. And it just, there wasn't a lot of people invested in, you know, their landscaping, the way they kept their property. There's a lot of people with problems who moved in from Detroit who are just trying to deal with life. And so, you know, that started to, you know, change the nature community, more renters and more things happening. And, you know, when we moved here, we moved onto this street specifically because it was such a peaceful street. We couldn't believe how 6-7 streets off of Rochester Road, you got these huge pines. It was really kind of an oddity because when we moved out here, we always envisioned, not knowing all about Troy being from the east side, is that it was very sterile and the small trees. So the other thing, there's no sidewalks. And, you know, we have kids and older people walk their dogs, they're up and down in the morning. This lady who jogs every morning. And if you put in 30 different vehicles, I mean, you can try to do a study, but you know, I would question whether it's really able to study the patterns of people who have kids who are in soccer, kids, you know, they're going to be going up to Kroger's, CVS. A lot of people don't like to merge onto Rochester and go that way. I know I cut through all the time, especially when I'm going to the community center. So you're going to have a lot of extra traffic, you know, regardless of what these studies are proposed, whatever the word is, to say. So, you know, that was some of the concerns. And, you know, so I'm not sure what the level of these are going to be. And when you start to get people who are younger and building their careers and, you know, they're moving in and out, you don't have the kind of stable residence like you would with 2 or 3 regular houses, which still is profitable. I mean, I don't know who developed the master plan just because it falls within that. I mean, if that's the only standard, then Troy can do whatever it wants if the developer wants to pay more money, or if I don't know if they want to use this for rent. But, you know, you have to consider that there's people here. I have a friend down the street. I don't know if he's here. He's got 4 kids. I have a kid who's 14 and he's in soccer. He's probably going to get hopefully a scholarship. So, you know, if things change in the neighborhood, we always have the option of leaving, and we don't want to. We've only been here 8 years and we really like it. But, you know, it's just unfortunate. And I understand that people have the right to develop property, and maybe my perspective is a little bit different, but you know, that's just basically where I'm coming from. And you know, I just think it would fit the nature of the community better and the people who've been here, you know, to keep it to a more limited residential development.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. One of my newer neighbors, I've lived on Sylvanwood all my life. My parents moved to Troy in my name is Donald Tarr. I live at 937. I am 1 lot away from this proposed development. They spoke of the neighbor to the west of it. I plow that neighbor's driveway. I help him cut his grass. He's over 80 years old. He's never been approached about this. Never said a word to anyone. When they applied for this, I looked into it and I'm like, I can't believe that they think it can come off of Sylvanwood. No sidewalks, ditches. It's almost dangerous for us to go get our mail. We've had the police department put one of those things that let you know if you're speeding. I think they're trying to stuff a lot into a little here. It's R1C zoning. We all own single-family homes. You want to build single-family homes? Go ahead. You could probably get $600,000 for 3 or 4 houses. I mean, each house for 3 or 4 houses. Or build beautiful homes. Troy would benefit from it. But 10 units into what had 1 home on it for all of my life, I think is shooting the moon. You know, and as you said in the meeting, I've been paying attention. They look for you for a recommendation. My recommendation is build 3 beautiful homes there. We'll all welcome our neighbors. We're very culturally diverse on our street. We have every walk of life, every religion. We like each other. We wave to our neighbors. But I think that this development is overdoing, even though it does comply. And I see my yellow light, so I guess that's all I'm going to say. But as a lifelong resident there, this does not fit. And you can see 937 on your little plot plan there. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Christine Szymanczyk, and I live at 5464 Whitehaven. I am just 2 lots off of Sylvanwood in the Sylvan Glen subdivision. I'd just like to bring up 2 things, and if the department can make a study on this. From 4:30 till 6 o'clock, people cut off of Rochester Road. They go through our subdivision. They either go off on Trinway or Sylvanwood to go northbound on Rochester Road that is backed up. And they can get out easy because it's backed up. And I'd like you to do a study of how many cars come through our subdivision between that time. I don't think it's as prevalent in the morning, but at nighttime, that light going eastbound on Long Lake, not the light, but the second light that's just where the turnaround is, gets backed up, and Long Lake gets backed up all the way to Livernois. Because I live in the Sylvan Glen sub, and I'm just getting into our sub where I can turn in because I legally live there. But you'll see that there's many cars, and what I don't like is the entrance off of Sylvanwood. All the other multi-family homes have entrances off of Rochester Road. And I think that's where the entrance should be, because people are going to be coming down Sylvanwood, and people are going to be wanting to get in and out of there, and it's going to be all backed up and lined up to go to Rochester Road, making a left-hand turn. And ultimately, there's going to probably have to be a light there, just like down at the condos down by the church, north of Square Lake. They finally put a light. But those are my 2 concerns, is the traffic, and because there are no sidewalks, and I walk Sylvanwood a lot, too. There are no sidewalks on Sylvanwood at all. They're just ditches. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Courtney Asher. I actually don't live in Sylvanwood. I live on 1149 Boyd Street, Troy, just about a mile and a half up the road. Having come from living in the Midtown Square condominiums at 15 Mile and Coolidge, which were luxury condominiums, I lived there for about 10 years, bought a house to get away from that, because what I saw happen over the course of those 10 years, originally they were family-owned or single-family-owned, and what happened was, over the years, people moved out and used this as rental properties. And when that happened, the deterioration of it came in. Nobody took care of anything. Nobody paid attention to what was going on. Cars screaming down the road. all the time. There were kids in that neighborhood, dogs in that neighborhood, and this is a neighborhood that had sidewalks in it. So we're going to a place over here, and I moved out to get away from that, to live on a nice, quiet, private street. I would be demoralized. And I've seen smaller houses, and I own a small house on Boyd, and I've seen the smaller houses on Boyd Street go down, and they've built big, beautiful houses. I don't oppose that. That is wonderful for my property values. I would be mortified if I saw a condominium complex go up where you're getting renters in, know how many people, you don't know where the people are parking. Nobody cares. They don't care. They don't care. I already have people screaming down my street. So I just think this would be really devastating for what a beautifully quaint street this is. It is so close to Rochester Road, which is already so jammed up with traffic. And speaking to, as far as the first house, that greenhouse that was torn down, the second house there and the third house there, the developer did not speak to the two current owners because they were recently sold. So the original owner, Chris Colombo, may have spoken to the developer, but he did not speak to the people that had bought this house, these houses, those two houses there. So that is not true as far as speaking to people in the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is James Jones. I live at 915 Sylvanwood. Don't know where to start, but I live next door to Don. So I am impacted greatly, and I'm just blown away that it's proposed that there's going to be 10 units at the end of my street right there. It is so busy you can't even pull out and make a left turn, at any of these. And whoever did the traffic study, it's not accurate at all. It's a very busy street. Trying to get out and make a left is just unbelievable. You almost have to make a right, and three rights to make a left. But in the neighborhood, we've had anything kind of under 200,000 has been ripped down, and they put $600,000 houses there. That's wonderful. That's great. They're beautiful homes. I understand the builder wants to make the most for his buck, but he doesn't have to live there. He doesn't live next door. He doesn't live down the street. I don't know. We moved there. It's kind of like almost country-ish even there. I was blown away when we went and looked at the house and got the house. Mature trees, a lake in the back. I worked in Troy for years, and it was just kind of like a little pocket in Troy. It was almost like country, besides the road noise, from Rochester. But didn't think this was going to happen. I actually thought it was 4 lots. I looked into that house a few years ago, and it didn't sit vacant for 10 years. There was somebody there. He didn't take care of it, but he was there most of the time. I know he moved out of state maybe for a year and came back. But I thought it was 4 lots when I looked at it. And I thought they were trying to make this work because maybe it was the 3 lots facing Sylvanwood and the one in the back they wouldn't have access to. So there was kind of a different development going to be like this, but I never pictured 10 units. It's a bit excessive. If they said 8 units or 6 units, that's even a bit excessive too. And I can't imagine what my neighbor at 945 that's lived there for decades is thinking, the old man. There's no way he was told about it. He would be here. So I just, I don't want to be pushed out. But something like this would push us out. I mean, it's a quiet street. People walk their dogs. People walk their kids. They follow their kids on bikes up and down the street. And Don, my neighbor, said the police have the thing up there to tell the time that they're speeding down the street. That's there almost year round. So just the traffic study wasn't accurate at all.
Thank you.
You know, there's no way. Thank you.
Anyone else wishes to speak on this item?
I'm Mike Donahue, 962 Sylvanwood, directly across the street from the proposed development. Lived in Troy for 10 years. Loved the city of Troy. Was in a condo for all 10 of those years, and because of the noise, the trouble, the drug busts, a lot of 24/7, really couldn't sleep with the ambulance, police, fire, neighbors, what have you. I really wanted out of there and was looking to stay in Troy, and found what I thought was exactly what I wanted at 962 Sylvanwood. Beautiful, quiet street. Everything all my neighbors have mentioned before about it is true. And I closed 3 months ago, almost to the day here. And about 2 weeks after closing, this popped up, and would definitely not fit the character of the neighborhood. I understand the master plan. I've read it from cover to cover. I understand the Rochester Road Corridor project. It's not the Sylvanwood Drive Corridor project, as far as I can tell. So if it entered off Rochester, that might be different. We've been making reference to the golf course, but before the golf course, actually what's next to it is a park. The history and character and charm of this neighborhood got me out of my condo that I'd been in for a decade, and I was very excited to get in, and everything has changed now. So the rug has been pulled out without warning. There was no prior disclosure of that at the time I bought, where I'm almost certain there was knowledge. So my recommendation would be that you don't recommend this project moving forward. If you do, I'd hope it'd be accessed off Rochester Road, as others have said. But really, why stop there? Let's do a 60-story skyscraper if we want to maximize revenue. So I'm not interested in Mosquito Pond being directly across from my driveway. I see some discrepancies in the information I was able to gather from the website, suggesting Rochester Road, Sylvanwood Drive is 22 feet wide, but then on some of these plans I see it's 50 feet, so I'm not sure what's going on with the math there. And as I look at it, it doesn't seem to fit. The pictures that I see, the drawings and mock-ups, doesn't fit. As I look out my front window and see deer out there, I can't fathom that this would all actually fit. I understand the reports that have been done, but there's, I think, some misinformation. Thank you.
Good evening. Name's Mike Mitkowski. I live at 756 Sylvanwood. It's up towards the middle of the street and all. And yeah, this project, I oppose to it. It doesn't fit the neighborhood because it's all residential, and I don't see it. I do not want it there at all whatsoever. Like Donnie Todd suggested, nice couple, 2, 3 homes, yes. And I'll welcome to that. And your accuracy on the traffic on the street is very wrong. You should be there sometime during the weeknight and all that, where people cut off of Long Lake, you know, they come through the subdivision and go down our street about 40 miles an hour just to get to this corner of our street to turn north on Rochester Road. And like I said, I oppose this plan, and it doesn't fit our neighborhood. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Pierre Herrick. I live at 692 Sylvanwood. That's just down the road, about 10 houses down from there, on the south side of Sylvanwood. I am opposed to a 10-unit development there. I can understand. When I looked at the properties, all of them put together are about 1.25 acres. I can understand if you decided to approve maybe the addition of one more unit there in order to become a 4-unit property instead of, so they're converting it from an R1C to probably an R1D or an R1E. That would make sense, but going all the way from there to an RT, which I wasn't completely sure what's the difference between that and the multifamily one, but I just don't feel that that represents what this whole community is obviously telling you. I looked at the study that was given, the traffic study, and it was saying something around 5 trips added to the subdivision coming out of Sylvanwood. I believe that is false. I would like, maybe you guys should have OHM do another study, because there's the potential of 33 cars that are going to be in that development, and what they're saying is a quarter of them are going to leave the house during rush hour. Just with me and my family, we have 2 cars, and both cars leave during rush hour. And so I think about 75% of them would leave. That's 25 cars doing multiple things during rush hour. Rush hour is very, very hard to get out of Sylvanwood. Again, Sylvanwood itself is not a busy road, but Rochester Road is a very busy road. Going southbound on Rochester, it takes you 3 to 4 minutes to get there to be able to turn onto southbound. To go northbound, it takes even longer, and most of the time you only get through because of the courtesy of the other drivers on Rochester Road giving you the space so you can get through to get up there. Adding these extra cars, especially at the end of Sylvanwood, is going to cause such a traffic jam. And not just that, there's also during the winter, the snow is never plowed from the approach on there, and it's always dangerous, it's always slippery. And these extra cars are going to probably get stuck there. I've had my neighbors get stuck there twice. I've had to go there and help them out. And these are neighbors that I don't know, but I know they're from Sylvanwood, and I had to do that because I am their neighbor. And I feel like this is just going to cause more traffic. It's going to cause us more problems. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishes to speak on this item? If not, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the table for further discussion or resolution. Mr. Savana.
I'd like to clarify a few things, if that's okay, Mr. Chair. First, the report referenced a 22-foot wide paved street within a 50-foot wide public right-of-way. So that was the discrepancy in the numbers. One was the width of the right-of-way, and one is the width of the actual paved street. With regards to talking to the neighbors, there is no requirement that applicants talk to their neighbors. We encourage it. We encourage this applicant to do so. He's indicated that he has talked to numerous neighbors. We'll take that at his word. It's not a requirement. And someone indicated that the gentleman who lives at 945 would have been here had he been talked to. I want to just remind everyone that this is a public hearing for rezoning, and there's state law mandates how we contact people, inform people of public hearings. So we mailed everyone who lives within 300 feet, received written notice of this public hearing in the mail. So the resident at 945 would have received that. We also placed a sign on the property indicating that if anyone had any questions, they could contact the planning department. And we placed an ad in the newspaper 15 days prior to this evening. So there was numerous ways that we inform people, and I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments, Mr. Trent?
I've got a couple quick comments. The developer indicated that he talked with the neighbors, and I don't know his exact words, but he said basically everyone that he talked to thought this was a good project. Go ahead. Now, he said he talked to the neighbor at 945, and I see that neighbor 945 signed this petition opposing this. So there's an inconsistency in the stories here. He also said the developer said he talked to people in the surrounding, and I just marked on the petition all the people surrounding, and all of them are on this petition saying no. So I don't know how he got such an agreement on the neighbors' their comments saying this was a good development when they all signed this petition opposing it.
Any other comments? Mr. Stanzik.
I had a question about the traffic study. I realize that they look at the traffic that's generated from the development, but do they look at the traffic that's coming off of Rochester Road and how development would impact that traffic?
So they did not look at the traffic coming off Rochester Road. They did analysis of the existing traffic on Rochester Road, which during peak periods is 3,500 cars during peak period and 40,000 total per day. So based on, if you factor the maximum, which was 8 based on their study, 8 cars leaving during peak rush hour onto Rochester, 3,500 cars would be approximately 0.23% of the total traffic increase. But there was not a detailed study in terms of which they did studies in terms of which way the traffic would be going in and off of Rochester Road.
Yeah, Mr. Krent.
Just want to follow up on the traffic. Was the traffic study actual car count or vehicle count, or was it just a theoretical?
It was based on ITE numbers, based on a 10-unit or 10-unit multifamily development. They did not specifically go out there at the intersection and count cars going each direction.
And just to follow up on that, so some of the neighbors talked about cut-through traffic going from Long Lake and then cutting through. So I'd like to see what the real traffic load is on Sylvanwood as opposed to a study based on standards. I don't think the standards take into consideration maybe cut-through traffic. So that's kind of, I'd like to really know, what kind of impact is right there now. It's not, it may be horrendous now. I don't know without that kind of information. Anyway, that's my thoughts.
Just to piggyback on that question, does the city planning department or engineering department actually require, or is that standard procedure that developments get a cut-through study and a actual traffic study based on ITE, or those? So we separate those.
So it's a case-by-case basis. We get an application submitted. The city traffic engineer, who's also our city engineer, makes a determination whether a traffic study is warranted. In this, for this particular development with 10 units, he actually made a determination that a traffic study was not warranted. given the number of trips that could be expected to be generated. However, we had an informal meeting months ago on this item, and a number of residents indicated concern about how much traffic would be entering and leaving this site. So I requested that OHM prepare a report addressing the trip generation for this site. So it's not a traffic study per se. It's specifically created at the request of myself to address the concerns related to the trip generation for this site.
Okay, thank you. One more question, Mr. Carlisle or Mr. Savanat. The rendering that was placed up there indicated a wet retention area. Is that just for illustration purposes? That actually is not going to be a permanent pond or a detention, is that correct?
I'm not sure the applicant has gone through detailed engineering to determine that yet. If they have any additional information, they can certainly provide that, but I'm not sure we know at this point if it will be a wet or not pond.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Mr. Sensi?
I have to ask, would it be allowed to have the driveway off of Rochester Road? Was that even considered?
I think it was considered, Mr. Yanzika, and I think the issue is, if you can turn your head to the screen, is that the deceleration lane to get into Sylvanwood actually extends into where the access point probably would be most likely located on Rochester, so it was deemed not feasible for that reason. I think the applicant can go back and look at that in more detail if that's the direction of the Planning Commission, but that was the reason why it was considered to push it off Sylvanwood too. In addition, I'm not sure if the Rochester Road, that section is a county road or not, but typically they like to have access coming off the side roads and not have direct access off of Rochester.
MDOT Road.
Yeah, Rochester is an MDOT.
It's an MDOT Road.
MDOT Road? Okay.
Mr. Grant.
Just to follow up to Mr. Sanzika's comment, I understand if you had an access onto Rochester Road, how difficult that would be for both drivers on Rochester Road, having two basically curb cuts, one at Sylvanwood and one just slightly north of that. But I still would like to see the developer propose something. The deceleration lane would have to obviously be widened if they were going to bring that in. That would allow acceleration coming out of that new proposed development. It would not, though, help deceleration on southbound traffic into the subdivision. So I realize it's not the best solution to have it on top of Rochester Road. Traffic-wise, it's better that it does have access to Sylvanwood, but I would like to see an access to Rochester Road and not Sylvanwood.
Ms. Cruz?
I'm not sure that anyone can answer my question, but if the developer took this parcel and did the by right for single-family homes, it seems to me that that would be easily accessible off of Sylvanwood. You could have a street that would go into that parcel to each of the four homes and then would not create any real additional traffic situation regardless of what's going on Rochester Road. I mean, the idea that we need to rezone this parcel just means we're taking it from the single-family homes to the 10-unit multifamily, and I'm not sure what the benefit is for 6 more families to be able to live on the parcel when it creates a tremendous amount of traffic questions on the committee. So maybe at some level the better answer is he does his 4 single-family homes and we don't have traffic issues, and we have a neighborhood that's a whole lot happier with a single-family home model versus a multifamily home model. And generally speaking, we end up then with 4 new homeowners that traditionally indicate they have greater skin in the game for the city of Troy than renters or transitional condominium owners. Just a thought.
Thank you. Any other? Mr. Krant?
I hate to hog the mic, but thank you, Karen. I agree with you.
I have a question.
Mr. Stanzica.
I was just curious, in the condominium documents, are there any limits on the amount of renters or if the property could be rented versus properties, residents have to be the owners of the property generally?
Those type of documents have not been submitted yet. They're not required at this point.
Maybe could the applicant respond to that? I'm just curious if there's any conditions on that you propose as far as renters go.
We haven't prepared any, we haven't prepared any such documents at this time. However, all these units are to be sold. Could there be could we impose some condition ahead of time to limit the ability to rent? The answer to that legally is probably not. I'll obviously leave Ms. Dufresne to give you the answers to legal questions, but the answer to that is probably not. But our intention is not to have these as leases. We intend to build them and sell them to future residents.
What's the price range for these residents? The price range?
Low 300,000s probably.
All right. Thank you.
As a starting point, of course.
Mr. Chairman, may I comment?
Yes, Mr. Dufresne.
I would remind this board this is a conditional rezoning, and the applicant could offer something in writing that would serve as a condition based on what the comments that are being stated about renters. Just something to keep in mind.
And to that end, Mr. Dufresne and I have been speaking about all the conditional rezoning ahead of this meeting, obviously, and anything and everything that you would include, we'd be happy to incorporate into that agreement.
Those need to come from you guys.
Correct. Well, they do come from us. We volunteered in the agreement, and based on obviously your comments.
Ms. Cruz.
I understand what Mr. Dufresne has said, but anything that we would ask him to do and he would agree to would obviously have to be legal. And I'm not sure, it's been a long time since I've had property law, but I'm not sure that you can sell condominiums to people and then make them contractually agree that they'll never move out and let someone rent the unit from them. That seems to be something that I would say is against property rights, just off the top of my head.
I can address that issue.
I think it's just more of a comment from Ms. Cruz. Is it a comment?
It's more of a comment. Like I said, I don't see how you could legally bind someone to that sort of a condition to never use a piece of property that they own as a rental, particularly in a multifamily situation. Just comment.
Mr. Hudson.
I am a lawyer also, and I can tell you that in Macomb County, that very issue came up about short-term renters. And it was determined that that one was all right because they started the process before the township enacted an ordinance which would prevent that. And Ms. Cruz is absolutely right. It's a property right. You can't contractually give away something you don't own. And perhaps it's a city problem if they think it's a problem about short-term renters. But I think we're making a lot of assumptions here that low-class people are going to come in here and lease this and decimate the area. I don't believe that. The developer's got an absolute right to develop this property. And if we all looked at the presentation Mr. Carlisle made earlier in this proceeding, everything that the ordinance required and the master plan suggested we do has been met. So I submit they're in a very good position to get the conditional rezoning. And I would also go a little further and say that this commission cannot ask of an applicant in a conditional rezoning to include something. And I think you're pushing the envelope. You say, well, maybe that'd be a good thing for us to have, and have the pressure put on the developer at that point saying, I'd like to get this thing done, but now they want this condition in there. I think it's inappropriate for us to even suggest something of this nature.
Ms. Cruz.
While Mr. Hudson's point is well taken, I mean, he does meet, appears to meet the requirements of the rezoning under the ordinance. He still meets the requirement of staying zoned as is with his 4 single-family homes. I mean, this conditional rezoning is optional. He can still develop it by right.
So just going back to the concern that you brought up earlier, and also the concern that has been brought up with this project, and the concern that's been brought up with many previous projects that come before us, and that's the impact of the traffic. And first off, the traffic studies that are requested, or the traffic studies that are done by the city, they're based on ITE national standards, and the same standards are applied to this project as are applied to any other project. So if we just strictly look at the numbers, empirically speaking, the peak hour volume of traffic that would come onto Sylvanwood and come onto Rochester, if we would actually oblige or ask the applicant to change his project to single-family homes and put 4 homes, that would basically cut that peak hour volume theoretically in half. So we would be going from 5 vehicles peak hour to 2, 2.5, and that would reduce that percentage from 0.2 to 0.1. So that's really theoretically whatever that impact is on Rochester and Sylvanwood. So if we just look at the impact, those are the numbers that we're looking at, really at, going from 10 units to 4 single-family homes. So I think we need to look at that difference there and say, is there really a difference between 4 units and 10 units in terms of the ITE peak hour volume? That needs to really be taken into consideration when we're talking about asking the applicant to just limit this project to only 4 units. So I just wanted to throw that thought out there. Any other thoughts? Mr. Faison.
I just had a question. Mr. Carlo, I think you had a slide that showed other multi-family developments with access off of Rochester Road.
Some do, some don't, and it's multifamily. The properties outlined in yellow are properties that are zoned the same zoning designation. Just to be clear, there are essentially 3 multifamily zoning designations in the Troy zoning ordinance. There's the RT, there's the multifamily, and there's the urban residential. This is the least dense and least intense in terms of numbers and height and setback, et cetera, of the 3 multifamily zoning districts. That's why in the master plan it calls for this type of zoning along Rochester Road. So the properties outlined in yellow are those properties zoned RT. The properties in red, kind of the corners of those node parcels, now those can be a much more intense multifamily development because of their orientation and their location. But the properties in front of you are zoned RT, and there's a mix, or some that are accessed off major miles, and there's a few it looks like that are not.
And so I was just curious if there's any difference in terms of the ingress and egress that you can have in those locations than could potentially be had in this location. There was discussion about the deceleration lane and things like that. Are those
I think
issues for those?
One is Every development's done on a case-by-case basis.
Sure.
So those are obviously reviewed individually. Those, if you can notice, that they're much larger parcels, so they have much more frontage to get that access. So if the Planning Commission wanted the applicant to go back and look and speak to the traffic engineer and MDOT essentially about an access off Rochester, we would have to review that on a case-by-case basis for this particular development.
Thank you.
Mr. Soda.
Not a traffic engineer. But regarding the potential for a curb cut on Rochester Road, there it is. Like Mr. Carlisle said, like I've said earlier, it's case-by-case basis. So about 75% of traffic accidents involve left-hand turns. If there were to be a curb cut to access this property on Rochester Road, you're introducing another left-hand turning movement and another conflict. And what our engineering department does when we receive applications like this is we weigh the potential impact of another left-hand turn on Rochester Road, which I believe Mr. Carlisle indicated over the 24-hour period is 40,000 cars a day. So we weigh the impact of that versus putting the curb cut on Sylvanwood, which is obviously less busy, and with a total of 10 units with an AM peak of 5 trips and a PM peak of 8 trips. So that's weighed. So and there's other information that goes into that decision, but that's kind of the nuts and bolts of the decision. So you weigh all that information, and the determination was that the curb cut for the access for this property be on Sylvanwood. That's not in every situation. Had this been a different size property with more units, perhaps the location of the access would be justified for placing it on Rochester, but in this instance it was not. And I don't believe that MDOT nor the city attorney, or excuse me, the city engineer are going to support access on Rochester Road for this particular application.
Can you, Mr. Stanzik?
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just curious on the process. If this isn't recommended at this time, would it still go to the city council?
Yeah, so they seek a recommendation tonight, so there'll be a vote, and whatever that tally is, it will be moved forward to city council. So if the recommendation was in the negative, that's the recommendation that would go forward to city council. If it was in the affirmative, that's the recommendation that would go forward to city council.
I also want to remind the Planning Commission that the applicants here tonight, they're listening. They do have the opportunity to request that they go back and do further study based on what they heard tonight and provide additional information to support their case. So they have the right to go back and amend their application if they would like to, based on what they heard tonight as well.
Mr. Soda.
One more thing, I'm sorry. So I heard I think 2 members suggest that they preferred an application under the R1C for 4 units. I just want to remind the Planning Commission, the application that we have before us this evening is for a conditional rezoning to RT. So what the role of the Planning Commission this evening is to determine if the application is consistent with the master plan, if the application meets the standards for rezoning, and if the site plan is compatible with the neighborhood and consistent with the zoning ordinance. If those 3 tests are met, then the Planning Commission members should vote yes. If the Planning Commission feels that any of those tests are not met, then the Planning Commission members should vote no on the recommendation.
Mr. Carlisle, do you recall how many units was that development on the east side of Rochester, just south of, I believe it was Long Lake, that the road that was south of Glasser, and then there was another road on the east side, the Robertson Brothers.
Yeah, I think you're referring Bradley Place, Bradley Square, between 30 and 35 units. I don't know the exact number.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that
similar layout, similar orientation, similar design as to what's being proposed.
Right, and that was one of the developments that actually came off of Bradley and not off of Rochester with 30 plus units.
Correct, all the access is off of the side streets, not off Rochester. Right. Yes. Okay. It's farther south of this property.
Okay. Any other questions, or are we ready for a resolution on this? Mr. Sanzika?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to commend the audience and how professional all your presentations were, and civil, you did a great job. I think it's our duty as a planning commission to vet those questions out, as far as to asking our professionals, and I just wanted to thank you again for being courteous and professional and abiding by the rules. But what I'd like to do is go ahead with the resolution.
Sure, go ahead.
Resolved that the Planning Commission hereby recommends to the City Council that the R1C to RT conditional rezoning request, which incorporates preliminary site plan approval as per section 16.04 of the City of Troy zoning ordinance located on the west side of Rochester Road, north side of Sylvanwood, within section 10, being approximately 1.2 acres in size, be approved, subject to the following: increase the sidewalk on Rochester Road to 8 feet.
Mr. Elephant.
Moved by Mr.
Before
yes.
you move for a second, may I suggest that there is an additional recommendation in the presentation this afternoon or this evening that any design recommendations or changes be submitted to the planning department.
Sure, we can add that.
I would concur with that.
I beg your pardon?
I would agree with that.
Thank you. Okay. I'll second the motion.
Seconded by Mr. Hudson. Mr. Carlisle.
Just to clarify, that point was if there was discussion tonight from the Planning Commission on the actual elevations, this is your chance to review the elevations, that those should be incorporated in the motion. As of what I've heard, I haven't heard any discussion from the Planning Commission on the actual detail of the elevations.
So at this point, there was nothing to incorporate on that item as an addendum or so.
Yes.
So moved by Mr. Sanzika, seconded by Mr. Hudson, without any items of architectural elements or anything architecturally changing them. Is that correct? Okay. Roll call, Ms. Sarnecki, please.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
No.
Mr. Zanzika?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Apahidian?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz?
No.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Ms. Fowler?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr.
Those in the audience can expect this item to go before the City Council. I believe the earliest it can go is in the new year. But everyone within 300 feet will be provided with notice in the mail, and there'll also be notice in the newspaper.
Okay, thank you. Item number... We'll take a 5-minute recess.
Nobody on the street.
Item number 6 on the agenda, special use approval, public hearing, special use and preliminary site plan review, file number SUJPLN 2018-0022, proposed suburban collision of Troy building addition, north side of Temple City Drive, north of Maple and west of Crooks. 1520 Temple City Drive, Section 29, zoned MR Maple Road District. Mr. Carlisle.
Thank you. Hopefully this one's a little less controversial. The site is proposed tonight in front of you is Temple City Drive. It's located just west of Crooks Road. The site is located within the auto-oriented or vehicle-oriented area of Troy. A lot of auto body shops, there's a lot of auto sales sites, etc. The applicant is proposing to put a 28,000 approximately square foot addition to the existing building on site. You can see from above, the site is outlined in red. The existing building is the white box, and the proposed addition is this yellow box in front. This is a floor plan of the actual building with the addition. The existing 44,000 square foot building is going to be used for automobile storage. The addition in this location, the 28,000 square foot addition, will be used for light auto repair and paint shop. The site is not open to the public. What it is a site that will be used by all the suburban dealerships in the area to bring their vehicles over for storage as well as light repair and paint. So each suburban collection dealership will have their employees that will bring the cars back and forth from their site to this particular site. So it will not be open to the public for access. Because it's an automobile-oriented use, it does require special use approval in this district. So again, it's a 28,000 square foot addition. In totality, the total building on the site will be approximately 72,000 square feet. All access will be off Temple City Drive. In total, the application is 176 parking spaces. That's somewhat misleading because 125 of them are actually in the 44,000 square foot building. So actually on site, there are 51 outdoor spaces. We do recommend that a condition of approval of this as a special use is that any automobiles in need of repair are parked inside the building and not left out in the 51 space parking lot. We do note the addition itself does comply with the setback and height requirements of the Maple Road District. In the building, moving the building closer to Temple City Drive actually is in more compliance with the zoning district requirements of Maple Road District. The one issue that there should be some planning commission discussion is that of landscaping and open space. The addition requires a site configuration and actually reduces the amount of open space. This district requires 15% of the site be open space. The applicant is only providing 12.5%. We do note that there's an existing kind of broken asphalt collar located along the north and east side of the building. What was not clear in the calculation provided by the applicant is, does that broken collar area, does that count towards the 12% they're providing, or is it not included in the 12%? Either way, we think that should be removed and landscaped accordingly. If it is removed and gets them above the 15%, then they are in compliance with the ordinance requirement. If it's removed and it was counted towards the 12%, they are deficient by 2.5% of the required open space. Now there are options for them to consider. One is simply just to provide more open space on site or landscape area on site. The second is to provide some sort of hardscape feature that would count towards the 15%. That can be a plaza, it can be some kind of pedestrian-oriented area of the site. The third is they have the option to go through the sustainable design option where they actually offset through typically some creative use of stormwater management, but that would have to go through the Sustainable Development Committee, I believe it's called. And the applicant has not gone through that process yet. So there really are three options to consider if the applicant can't provide the 15% of open space. The other point of discussion is the applicant has provided the required amount of landscaping on site. However, we do note that all the required parking lot trees are located on the eastern property line, not where they're supposed to be located within the parking lot itself. So the Planning Commission should have some discussion on this, and the Planning Commission does have the right to require them to put those 8 trees actually within the 51-car parking lot itself. Or the Planning Commission also does have the authority to allow them to move it in a different location that's required by the ordinance. In addition, the applicant did not indicate any sort of dumpster or trash enclosure outside the building. I'm not sure if the trash enclosure is going to be inside the building or not. However, if it is outside, the applicant should provide that on their site plan, and the screening should be complementary to the building itself. This is a rendering of the site from Temple City Drive. This elevation is going to be the one that fronts on Temple City. This is a side elevation that fronts on that 51-car parking lot. They indicate it's a blend of metal panels, insulated glass panels, and masonry units, as well as these masonry piers that you see running up and down the elevation. It does comply with the transparency requirements on Temple City, as well as the parking lot side. That's part of the Maple Road District requirements. Because it's special use, there are standards of approval, compatibility with adjacent uses, compatibility with the master plan, the impact of traffic, the impact on public services, as well as the compliance with the zoning ordinance standards. We find that if those site plan issues are addressed, as I noted earlier, it does meet the special use standard. It does fit in with the automobile-oriented uses in the vicinity. The use is consistent with the master plan. It should not cause any overall impact on traffic, as well as it should not cause any impact on public services within the area. So we are recommending special land use and preliminary site plan approval with the 4 conditions noted above. 1, all automobile parking in need of repair is located indoors. They plant the required parking lot trees within the parking lot or obtain a waiver from the Planning Commission to move it along the east property line. They remove the asphalt collar. If that gets them above the required open space requirement, then they're in compliance. If it doesn't, they need to submit another option to comply with the zoning ordinance, as well as lastly, they need to indicate dumpster location and proposed screening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carlisle. Any questions for Mr. Blau? Yes.
I have a couple. Tell me what you mean by asphalt collar.
So, on the north, the area in red, on the north and portions of the east side of the building, it looks like it was a drive at some point. It's broken up asphalt. It's in poor shape, and so regardless of what they plan to do with it, we recommend that they remove it and replant it as landscaping.
Okay, so the word collar, you meant like a collar around the
collar around the building.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Building of this size, what is the required parking?
Well, that's a great question. It's difficult to tell because it's an auto-oriented use where they're storing cars on site. So there's required parking based on every service bay and every area towards the repair itself. They're obviously over-parked in regards to that calculation, but because it's automobile storage, they don't really have a specific parking ratio in association with that.
But there are employees in this building.
Yes.
And I guess where I'm going with this is they've got 51 spaces outside. I don't know how many employees they're going to have in the building versus how many are required based on the ordinance. And if they have excess spaces outside, what are they going to use them for? Now, one of your conditions mentioned about cars needing repair, but they're also using this building to paint cars. Now, was it the intent that repair means repair or paint paint is part of a repair? Or is it a bump shop? Are cars going to be coming over that are going to be, dented and sitting there out in the outside lot?
So the applicant's here to answer those specific questions. The intent of what we're trying to do is that cars in need of repair, regardless of that means a new paint job and or in need of physical repair to the building, body work, are located in the building. And that's a standard that we have for any auto repair shop in the city.
So where I was going with this is if we determine the number of required cars for parking, not storage, but parking, I suspect there's going to be an excess number of spaces on the outside of the building to put a dumpster, put some landscape, whatever it is. So I'm trying to kind of understand what is the minimum or the required number of, I'll call it employee parking.
Well, it's much less. If you take the required employee parking with the requirement for the body shop itself or the paint shop, it's much less than the 51 they have on site.
Okay.
On the outdoors.
Okay.
So parking should not be the problem here.
Okay.
The concern is we want to make sure the parking lot is maintained and looks in a nice condition, as well as there's some trees in there.
Yeah, and the other thing I don't see on the plan is that if there are cars needing something, and again, I know you're saying all those cars need to be inside the building, but if there's excess parking outside, I'll bet you there's going to be cars sitting out there. Now, I don't see any screening. You know, if you were to put screening up and, you know, if you had cars with whatever, needing repair behind the screening. So anyways, we'll ask the applicant when he steps up. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Grant.
One quick question. The 15% landscape requirement, if they added trees to the parking lot, would that be part of that 15% landscape requirement?
That would count towards the 15%. I believe if you added 8 more islands with trees in it, it would equal at least 2.5%. But again, we didn't do the math on that, so they would have to provide that, show that.
But the asphalt does not count for open space landscaping?
No.
Just want to be clear.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yes, but parking lot trees and landscape islands in parking lot does count towards the 15%.
Thanks.
Would that be could it be just the island itself, landscape without a tree? Or does it have to actually have a physical tree?
The ordinance requires a physical tree.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Carlisle at this time? If not, we ask the applicant to come forward.
Good evening. My name is Jason Longhurst. I'm with Nowak and Frous Engineers. Here, hopefully I can resolve a few of the questions that are going around right now. So we've received the feedback from your consultant in the planning department, and we've taken a look at that. So I want to kind of go through the 4 or 5 issues that they had pointed out and what we plan to do to address those with the site plan. So the first, I guess the biggest one was the 15% landscaping. So what we did is we took a look at the site plan as it currently exists. I don't know if we can flip back to maybe one of the landscape plans or something to kind of illustrate. So here we have the asphalt collar that's been referred to going across the north and the east sides of the building. We're proposing to actually remove that, but we're going to replace it with new pavement. And the reason we're doing that is just operationally for the building, the way that they intend to use that. If you look at the elevations, you'll see there are man doors and there are overhead doors on both the north and the east sides of the building. So operationally, they are planning to bring goods and materials in and out of those sides of the building, so we do need the pavement there. But what we had done is we had actually extended that drive aisle all the way down to the southeast corner of the new addition. Now, there's no overhead doors there, so what we're looking to do is we'll take that pavement, we'll pull it back to the first overhead door. That generates about 1,500 square feet of additional landscaping right there. We're only deficient by about 3,000 square feet, so we're halfway there. And then the other 1,500 square feet, we can create some additional islands that was discussed in the parking lot so that we can get that 1,500 square feet. We do have the excess parking so that we can eliminate a few spaces in the exterior of the site, create the landscaping, and comply with the ordinance there. So I think with those changes, we can meet that requirement. We don't need a variance or need to do any additional measures there. Now, as far as the use of the building goes, this is, again, the existing building will be used for indoor storage of vehicles. The new addition will contain the paint booths and operations there. And this building, the operation is tied directly to the property to the west, which is the collision center, which is going to do the heavy-duty repairs there. So once the vehicles go through that shop, they'll be brought over to here to do the painting and the final details. So the bulk of the work, or the larger work, will be on the property to the west. Along with that, the operation currently utilizes the dumpsters that are on that property to the west. So the waste from this site is transferred over to there and utilizes those dumpster enclosures. The new addition will have a baler for the cardboard materials. So the cardboard will be baled and will either be collected on site or it will be transported to the neighboring property, both of which are under the control of the Suburban Collection. So we would be requesting to utilize that off-site dumpster instead of having to create an additional enclosure on this property. Regarding the request to park all of the automobiles that are in need of repair indoors, obviously our intent is to house those vehicles indoors, but there will also be times when those vehicles need to be parked outside. Some of the vehicles are going to be transported to the site via a tow truck or a car hauler or things like that. So they'll be offloaded outside, they'll be parked outside for a period of time, and then they'll be brought in either into the building for repairs or they'll be transferred off-site to their final destination there. So I think we'd be willing to add notation to the site plans indicating that there would be no long-term or permanent parking of those vehicles, but on a short-term temporary basis, there would be a need to have that there. The layout of the site actually is kind of conducive to that in that the screening question was brought up. So if you look at the site, as you're coming down Temple City, you'll see the addition in compliance with the zoning ordinance brings that front elevation out close to the right-of-way, and the shape of it and the parking lot, as you can see, there's a very limited window of actual view of the parking. So any of those vehicles that may need repair are going to be thoroughly screened just as a function of the complying with the zoning ordinance as far as the building location and all of that. So I guess our request there would be to allow the short-term parking of those vehicles and prohibit the long-term storage. So we've covered the parking lot trees, we've covered the asphalt collar, the 15%, and the dumpster location. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions, Mr.
Yeah, I have
Trent?
a quick one right off the cardboard. Okay, you've got this compactor for cardboard. Is any of that cardboard bundled, stored outside?
No, that's the baler's going to be located inside.
Inside, thanks.
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Senzi?
Could you go over the stormwater management for the site?
Sure. The stormwater is actually, the storm sewer exists on the site as is. The parking lot's currently existing. We'll be reconstructing catch basins and all of that, but it's all routed to a regional detention basin, which is actually just at the southwest corner of the site. I don't know if the aerial photographs pick it up here, but I think I've got one that I can show. Yeah, so the gray-brown rectangle there at the southwest corner of the site is the regional detention pond for this area.
Mr. Hudson?
I was a little confused when you were talking about the short-term parking of some of these vehicles. Would that be on the Temple City side, or would it be in the rear? And if it, where it was, what kind of landscaping is it going to be behind?
Sure. So the site as it exists here, you can see there's 2 drive approaches for the existing property on the Temple City, and then there's another drive approach for the building located directly to our west off of Temple City. What we're going to be doing is we're going to take those 3 drive approaches, we're going to convert them into one shared drive approach so that vehicles, car haulers will enter in that shared drive approach, and then our vehicles would be in the parking lot that is at the kind of the northwest corner of the building. So the building addition, all of the landscaping that we're doing along Temple City, and you'll see there's quite a substantial amount of landscaping that we're doing in front of the building as well. That'll all be screening that view from the back. So really the only view of those vehicles is going to be from the collision center directly to the west. There won't be a prominent view from the public, right away.
Mr. Tagle?
I understand your explanation about the building addition screening the parking lot, and that's true if you're headed westbound on Temple. If you're headed northbound on Temple, it's not quite the same story.
I think with the rework of the approach...
Well, I just looked at that picture right there, and if you look at the way Temple is coming up there, you look right down that alleyway of the parking lot.
Sure. And with the addition of the trees that we had talked about and creating those additional green spaces, I think we can have some islands there that'll help provide that buffering that you're looking for.
Tell me a little bit about what kind of vehicles are going to be stored outside. And when you say temporary, and I'm sorry, Mike, if you've asked this, what does temporary mean?
So the current use is going to have approximately 15 employees. So we're going to have 15 employee vehicles parked on the site.
50?
15.
15.
So we have 15 employees that'll be parked there. And then we also have all of the vehicles that'll be from the surrounding suburban dealerships and the collision center. So it'll be a wide range of makes and models.
Okay. My personal feeling is that those cars that are in need of whatever the repair is need to be screened. They cannot be part of an extension of the employee parking lot. And there's a lot of ways you can screen them. We're talking about deficiencies in landscaping. I think landscaping can be one option. But I see those 2 parking areas being segregated visually so that you do not see cars that are being towed in from a tow truck that may have dents in them or flat tires or whatever being out in the view of Temple.
Yeah, I think if we could go to the site plan sheet, I can illustrate where the island would go. So if you look, the arrows that are indicating the drive approach there, So to the right of the arrows is our landscape green belt along the right of way. There are trees planted in there. They don't show up very well in this image, but I believe there's 12 or 14 trees planted across the front. So you're going to have screening right there where the handicap parking is. There's 3 handicap spaces. And then as you go north onto the site, you'll see there's a striped island. That island we would propose to possibly convert to landscaping to address the previous comment. So we could put some screening in there. And again, there's a couple of islands as you continue to go north. So we're really funneling the sight line or the view. So you'll have landscaping to the right, we'll have landscaping in that island, and that's going to screen all of the cars that'll be in the north and the back of the site there.
Where are the employees going to park? Are they going to park from the, let's say, the indentation of the existing building? Are they going to park there to the south?
We haven't gone to designate exactly where employee parking cars will be versus any service vehicles. We haven't got to that level.
Well, that's an important aspect, because if you're using those front parking spaces to have a tow truck pull in and have a car that was just in an accident sitting there for 24 or 48 hours, that's a problem.
Yeah, I think if that's your concern, labeling those first couple of spaces as employees to provide the screening, have a nice vehicle there.
My point is, I understand what you're trying to accomplish, but I really would like to see some type of visible screening segregating that latter 2/3 of the parking visually. Yeah, obviously you leave the drive aisles open.
Sure.
But other than that,
I think we can accomplish that. I'm agreeable, yep.
So does the site have any kind of security fencing around it, around the perimeter?
There currently exists a fence across I believe the north, and the east property lines. And then again, it's tied directly to the body shop use next door, which is also fenced around the detention pond. So
currently no fencing from the approach on the south side heading into that existing parking lot?
We are proposing gating there.
So you are proposing gating?
Yep.
Okay. Could that possibly be used or made into some kind of screening, where if would it be one of the security type gates that it rolls, like a roll type of gate? Or
yeah, I guess maybe Suburban, so would you be opposed to an opaque screening on the gate?
No.
Okay.
I think it'd be good. It'd be better than what we have now, because now there's a fence going this way, and you have different fences. It'd be nice to tie the two together to flow better.
Okay. So is that something, Mr. Tagle, that you think would suffice or be an option to use that new gate that they're using to actually provide that screening? And would that gate close after business hours? Would it be closed? Okay, so
where's the gate? I was not paying attention.
It would cut directly across the new shared approach, and then it would be routed to tie into the corner of the building.
So here?
Nope, further south.
Further south.
Across that whole entire approach. See the little island at the southwest property corner?
And where does it head north?
It would head east into the building.
From the island, it goes to the handicap parking spot.
Yeah, it would go across the handicap and tie into the corner of the building.
And then from the island, where does it go?
Then it goes to the west, and there's an existing fence on the south side of the collision center that it would tie into. So that would basically secure that entire lot.
Yeah, I think that would work, but I would like you to design that fence with the same sensitivity that you've designed the new addition. I'd hate to see a chain link fence with vinyl slats in it, right next to the addition, where you put some thought and some effort in the design of the building. But I still think there's opportunity to meet the landscape requirement. I don't think that I'm not in a position, or I'm not ready to give you a reduction on.
No, we wholeheartedly intend on meeting the landscape requirement, and I guess I would request that just be a contingent on any approval that you may give tonight, that we would just work that out administratively with the planning department. But we fully believe we can comply with that requirement.
Okay, thank you.
I have one other question. Ms. Dufresne.
Yes.
These are two properties. Is there anything that needs to be documented from the city standpoint about we're using, one property is using, I don't call them services, but like, for example, the dumpster. We're talking about using a dumpster on an adjacent piece of property. Now, someday, whatever one of these properties be sold off, I don't know. But is there anything that needs to be covered from your legal perspective
Are there cross-access easements, or is it the same property owner?
Same property owner.
Same property owner. Then,
should the properties be combined?
Are they? They're not combined through assessing? No.
So I can answer your question, or I think you're getting at, I can answer it a different way.
Okay.
There's not a requirement that they have a dumpster. If they have a dumpster, it should be screened. So they've come up with a scenario where they're sharing an existing dumpster and eliminating the need for a dumpster on this property. So that works. At such time that this relationship between the two properties changes, they're going to either have to come up with a way to maintain that relationship with that dumpster, or they're going to have to provide a screened dumpster. I don't know if that's what you were getting at.
I guess this is the first I've ever heard where I could put a dumpster on my neighbor's neighbor on an adjacent piece of property and call it mine, or call it, or have that qualify for me meeting the ordinance. And if you're saying there's no requirement for a dumpster,
there's not a requirement. I have a feeling that this happens more than we think with shared dumpsters.
Okay.
Especially when it's the same property owner.
Yeah.
On a different piece of property.
Well, given the fact that the suburban auto mall, my guess is the shared dumpster is very common in this area.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Just one thing for
Mr. Quinn.
Are there time limits for stored wrecked vehicles on properties visible for collision shops?
So the ordinance says the exact situation you're talking about is that they can be parked on site outdoors for no more than 60 days, but they have to be screened behind an 8-foot high opaque fence and or a landscape screening, meeting our requirements in the landscape ordinance. You cannot just have cars in repair just be stored at a surface lot like being proposed before the fence was offered as a condition.
Thanks.
Was a question asked, did you clarify what does short-term mean for you in terms of operations for a vehicle? Is that 24, 48 hours before it's moved in, or what's considered short-term?
I don't know that we would say 24 to 48. I don't know if we have a definitive answer. Is it?
What happens is, I'm Kevin, I actually run the facility, and what happens is what I'm worried about is we don't have control over tow trucks that are coming in there at all hours of the day and night. We don't have control over Mrs. Jones, who drops her car off on a Sunday afternoon. So it's hard for me to tell you that there's never going to be a car there. Ideally, what's going to happen is our building to the west, there's going to be this constant flow going back and forth. I don't see cars sitting there at all. When we originally purchased this property, that we were going to tear that down for parking, but that building worked out so well to store vehicles inside and they aren't exposed to the elements, you're not constantly moving them. And what happens even today, we have cars that are towed into us, but the real estate is very valuable because of the sheer number of cars and the restrictions and everything else, that cars sometimes they sit for 2 hours and an insurance company comes and looks at them. Next time you get a car that someone's didn't pay their insurance. So it sits around while they go through some decision process that they're going to get the money, that the finance company's going to take the car. We go for a mechanic's lien within 60 days. We also charge the insurance company $50 a day for every day they leave a totaled car sit on that lot. So there's an incentive for them to move them. Since we started charging them for leaving these vehicles, it's amazing how fast they pull them off there. But there's a whole gamut of variables go with this. You get a car that the lady drops off out front and it's in a parking spot, looks fine. We go to drive it around the building and the wheel falls off. We don't leave it lay there, we can't. And if I could speak on the dumpster issue, we have a huge 45-yard compactor on the other building that's well screened, hidden. Inside that paint shop, there are going to be 4-yard hoppers. And the only waste you really have in a paint shop outside of your liquid, which is contained and hauled away within the laws and rules, but that those hoppers hold plastic and masking tape and sandpaper and whatever they're using to paint the car. Well, we have a forklift that goes over, gets them, takes them to that dumpster. So it makes sense to me to keep doing it the way we're doing it. I don't see the need to put in another, and then I've got to do screening, and now I'm going to be down to where I only can fit 15 employees in there ever. So And I'd be happy to answer any other operational questions you have. The idea is that we've outgrown our existing facility and we're moving the paint shop next door.
Thank you. Any other question for the applicant at this time? Mr. Carlisle?
I just wanted to make a comment based on the comments the gentleman made in terms of these variables. Because of these variables, that's the reason why we put the recommendation that all vehicles that need repair be stored indoors, because it's impossible for us as a city to go out and do enforcement and say, no, it's only been out there for 24 hours versus 72 hours. So, but it's much easier for us to look at the site and say, no, that car needs repair, it should be stored indoors. So for that reason, that's why we put that recommendation in. The gate may work, but we can't guarantee the gate won't be open for most of the time of the day, et cetera. So that's why we put the recommendation that all vehicles that need repair, physically need repair, be stored indoors, because it takes out the variables that was discussed by the applicant.
Mr. Hudson.
Well, that just raises a question in my mind, this variable. How do we take care of it? A car that's dropped off at midnight after a collision by a tow company, how long does it stay there? All stored inside, you can't get it in there if it's at midnight, I presume, but I think that's a great recommendation, they all be stored indoors, but the question becomes, when do they have to be pulled indoors to be stored?
Well, our code enforcement officers are out from 7 or so, 6 or 7 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon. Those are, I assume, times when you have employees at the facility itself. So arguably, if it was dropped off at midnight, they'll have employees there that could pull it in the building by the time our enforcement officers go out there. And our enforcement officers aren't going to go out and look for issues. But if they do notice an issue and they're driving by the site, these are the things that they can actually stand up to and say, yes, there's a wrecked car that needs to be put in the building. Versus,
that's what you're saying.
Versus, oh, it's been out there 24 hours versus it's been out there for 48 hours. That's something that's much more difficult for our enforcement officers to enforce.
I guess what you're saying, when the facility is open, if there's an automobile out there that needs repair, take it inside. It's not going to stay there for 3 days or a week or so. You want to move them in immediately.
Yeah, again, yeah.
Is that, I guess, what you're saying, Ben?
Without getting that specific, yes.
Okay.
That's what we're saying.
That's what your intent was, and I agree with that.
Yeah.
They got to have a little leeway if it comes in at midnight, But
well, no one that stays out enforcing the ordinance at it's realistically that
enforcement. Let's talk about what they've got to do.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a little leeway from the time it's dropped off until they open the doors for business the following morning.
Yes. What the intent is, we don't want vehicles that are in need of repair that are sitting out there for hours on end and days on end with no opportunity to be moved in the building. This is for short-term, couple hours after a drop-off of a tow truck, et cetera, and then they'd be moving the building. That's the intent of what that recommendation was.
Okay.
If I could add to that. The concern we've got is some of the vehicles that get delivered to the site aren't going to be repaired. They're going to be totaled. They're going to be scrapped. So to offload that vehicle in the lot, have to move it inside, and then have to bring it back outside to haul it off to be scrapped.
How often does that happen, though?
I would imagine quite frequently.
It happens quite frequently where the total loss. And I don't know if this helps at all, but the cars...
Sir, can you just come up to the mic, please?
The customer contact point is on the other building that's next to this building. There's a beautiful frontage, all the parking and everything you need. And all the heavy work and everything, those cars are normally over at that building, okay? There's not going to be a tow truck dump a car. I mean, it could happen during business hours. Some rogue character drops a car out there. I've seen it happen. But that is not our normal area. And most of the towing companies that work in this area that would be dropping a car after hours know where to put them so we can move them out of way all the time. And they're on the other piece of property, which is where the heavy repair work is done. The employees are currently parking in that parking lot right now. Mostly what I see going on is there's going to be a lot of transfer between the two buildings with cars that are not torn up and in a pile. They're going to be cars that are waiting to go in and be sprayed. They're going to be whole cars, rollable cars. I mean, And a lot of the cars we get in need a bumper put on it. You know, it's a fine line as to this car needs to be repaired. If it just has a little scratch on the door, does that need to be put in the warehouse? You know, pretty much it's done to protect the vehicles from the elements so that the customer's car is not filling up with water while it sits out there.
I think our point is we don't want to see cars sitting out there.
I understand that, but I'm telling you...
Well, now we're talking real fine, a scratch versus a missing fender.
This is what...
It's just easier to do, put them all inside.
Well, then we need to make that building about 4 times that size.
But it has some real good screening then.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes. You know, based on what I'm hearing now, I guess I'm wondering, why do you have 2 drives? Why, you've got a single drive that's split into two sides.
There is a utility pole right at that property corner. So we have to maintain...
Okay, can you eliminate the drive to the east and just have one drive going into these properties?
We need to inbound and an outbound. So we're taking 3, putting it down to 1 shared with an inbound on one side of the utility pole and an outbound on the other. The geometry of the approaches has been set up to allow for those car haulers or those tow trucks that are towing something to be able to get in and out. So you'll see there, I think they're 24 feet wide on either side. So the geometry and the width is set up to accommodate the truck traffic.
So every car or truck that comes in is going to come on the eastbound side, whether it's going to the building on the west or the building on the east?
Correct.
No, that wasn't, I didn't realize that. That wasn't that clear.
They'll pull in past the utility pole and then either go to the building on the east or make a left and go to the west.
And is this the only access point to these 2 properties?
Other than the shared access from the west.
Well, I meant right at the corner.
Yeah, off of Temple City, that's the only point into and out of there.
Where do these car haulers turn around?
I'm not sure. Do the car haulers come through there at all?
The car haulers that come through...
They come from the north?
From up at the top where you see the entrance on Maple Lawn, and they go behind the Highline dealership, and then they come down that side and pull out in Temple City because it's much easier for a car hauler.
Yeah.
They're not allowed to unload on Maple Lawn, so they come down there, and it's usually those big ones with the fancy cars that are all closed in, and that way the poor truck driver can just loop out onto Temple City.
Right, thank you.
One quick
Yes, Mr. Crane.
You talked about a fence, that'd be, or is that a gate going to be across the entrance from Temple City?
Right. Yep.
So those would be closed when they're not in business? Business hours are, like say, after business hours?
I believe the tow truck traffic will need access to those, so they...
No, the gates there would be closed at 6 o'clock Monday through Friday and closed on the weekends.
Nice.
Currently, we're not open on Saturdays.
Thanks.
Any other comments, questions for the applicant at this time? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Are we ready for a resolution on this, or do we, any other comments? I think we're ready for a resolution. Somebody want to read the resolution?
Isn't there a public hearing on this?
Oh, yes, there is. So, thank you. I will open up for the public hearing. Anyone in the audience that wishes to speak on this item, please come forward. Seeing none, I would close the public hearing, bring it back. Thank you, Mr. Hudson.
Sure.
It was so much quieter than the last item on the agenda. I almost skipped the public hearing, but so we'll bring it back. Any other comments, or somebody would like to make the resolution?
John, could you talk about the gate being similar materials as the building?
Yep.
I'll let you do that and add that part if you would, please.
So you're asking me to read the resolution?
Yeah, if you could. And then add your language.
Resolved that the special use approval and preliminary site plan approval pursuant to Article 8 and 9 of the zoning ordinance as requested for the proposed suburban collection of Troy building addition north of Maple and west of Crooks, in parentheses 1520 Temple City Drive, end parentheses, section 29, currently zoned MR Maple Road District, be granted subject to the applicant making including the following. Number 1, any automobile in need of repair shall be parked indoors. Number 2, plant required parking lot trees within the parking lot. 3, remove the asphalt collar. 4, verify compliance with the 15% landscape requirement. 5, I'm going to change 5. 5 doesn't apply anymore. I'm going to make 5 that the new gate and screen along Temple Drive be compatible in architectural appearance to the building architecture and materials used, and that needs to be approved by the planning department prior to final site plan approval.
I'll second.
Could I have a...
Yeah, there's...
Mr. Stabenow.
The motion that was read said remove asphalt collar. Could you amend that to remove a portion of asphalt collar? The applicant indicated they're going to actually repave a portion of that and remove a portion of it.
Are you going to remove it all and pave it all?
The existing limits we're going to remove and replace. We're going to delete a scope of the extension that was on the plans. So we want that to remain, but we will rehabilitate it.
Except for the portion in the south end of the east side.
Which will delete to comply with.
All right, let me see if I can put that into words. Remove the asphalt collar and replace with concrete? Your asphalt? Replace with asphalt around the north and east sides of the building, terminating the new asphalt at the southernmost overhead door. Is that okay?
Okay, second.
Were there any other?
Any other comments?
That was mine. That was mine as well, yeah.
Moved by Mr. Tagle and second by Mr. Krent. Roll call, Ms. Harnicke, please.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes.
Mr. Krent.
Yes.
Mr. Zanzika.
Yes.
Mr. Tagle.
Yes.
Mr. Abhidian.
Yes.
Ms. Cruz.
Yes.
Mr. Faison.
Yes.
Ms. Fowler.
Yes.
Motion passes. Moving on to item number 7, public hearing, special use and preliminary site plan review and modification of regulating plan, file number SUJPLN 2018-0024, proposed Subway restaurant with drive-through east side of John R., north of Maple Road, 1686 John R., Section 25, zoned NN Neighborhood Node C District. Mr. Carlisle.
Thank you. That was a mouthful. Last item tonight is a proposed renovation and reoccupancy of the building located at 1686 John R. Road. It's located on the east side of John R., just north of Maple Road. The building is an existing 4,361 square foot building. What the applicant is proposing is to maintain the existing footprint, but update the facade and build out the interior space for the construction of a Subway with a drive-through and a yet-to-be-determined retail use. As the chairman noted, the site is zoned NN Neighborhood Node Site Type B. Site Type B in the neighborhood nodes does not allow a drive-through. When the Planning Commission and ultimately the City Council went through and identified the specific neighborhood nodes and zoned those, there were some that were zoned for more intense uses and some that were zoned for less intense uses. These are the differences between the Site Type A's and the Site Type B's. This particular node was designated as a Site Type B based on the existing conditions at the time of the adoption of the zoning ordinance. So for that reason, it was zoned B to not allow a drive-through use. And I'll talk a little bit more about why it was zoned that way and what the ramifications are. So what the applicant is seeking tonight is a reclassification of the regulating plan to move this site from Site Type B to Site Type A. If that is done, the drive-through can be considered as a special use in this district with the site plan. So they're asking for 3 things tonight. A reclassification, that's 1. Site plan approval, that's 2. And the special use for the drive-through, that's the 3rd thing you're asking for tonight. In regards to the drive-through itself, it'll be open, they propose to have it open between 9 a.m. in the morning to 10 p.m. in the evening. And again, as I noted, if reclassified, the drive-through is a special use. So with regards to the site plan, behind you on the screen shows the actual proposed site plan itself. As I noted, the footprint of the building will remain unchanged except for the addition of the drive-through, which is located in the rear and the side of the existing building. The existing curb cut on John R. will remain. The applicant proposes a new curb cut on the northern end of the development, and they have a circulation pattern, a one-way circulation pattern around the entire site. So the circulation is this way around the entire site with the drive-through in the rear. The engineering department and the fire department have reviewed the circulation and finds that circulation is appropriate for the proposed use. With regards to parking, the applicant is proposing to maintain the existing 54 parking spaces on site. In addition, they have 10 stacking spaces for the drive-through use itself. We do note that the site is over-parked based on the proposed uses by 16 spaces. One of the conditions that we're recommending, because it's a drive-through use, is the elimination of the 11 parking spaces which are located along the eastern property line. This is adjacent to a single-family residential home. By eliminating these 11 parking spaces, they can provide a landscape buffer that is at least a minimum of 20 feet in width. So that's a significant area to put some significant trees for screening along that property line. In addition, by removing the 11 spaces, they'll still have 5 more spaces that's required by the zoning ordinance. So we don't see a downside to having those 11 spaces be removed from the site plan. So as I noted, if they were to eliminate those 11 spaces, the minimum buffer would be 20 feet along that property line. In addition, it's worth noting that there is an existing evergreen screen and berm on the north side of that property that will be maintained as part of the development. This is the proposed elevation of the building. The architect was asked to provide details of it at the meeting tonight, as well as building materials, and they're here to discuss that application. This is the proposed elevation facing the south end of the building. This is the north end of the building. This is the pickup window to the subway drive-through. This is the proposed rendering of the building. One of the comments I noted to them is this appears to be an EIFS material. It's actually a masonry material. It just didn't print very well, so the applicant is here tonight to discuss that. With regards to the drive-through application itself, the owner owns 5 other subway locations, and they note that typically with these drive-throughs at a subway, they see no more than 3 cars stack up at a time. If it's anything more than that, typically a person will park and actually come into the store itself. The applicant is proposing a touchscreen menu board in replacement of a speaker box. So you actually drive up to the menu board, touchscreen your order in, and then drive up to the pickup window to pick up and pay. The applicant notes that they are requesting the drive-through be open from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. in the evening. We do note that the Planning Commission should consider actually reducing those hours to no later than 8 p.m. on 8 p.m. in the evening, because it is adjacent, again, like I said, to single-family residential. In addition, we do note that there would be a significant opportunity to put more landscape buffering if they were to move those 11 parking spaces, again, to mitigate the potential of the drive-through operation. So in regards to the reclassification as well as the special use, a lot of the standards kind of are the same for both the reclassification standards and the special use. And we find that they do meet those requirements with the site plan recommendations that we do note. They're taking a vacant neighborhood node site with a building that really, frankly, is rather dilapidated, and they're improving it with a viable mixed retail building. One of the significant deterrents to a drive-through use, obviously, is the impact on adjacent properties. We think with the inclusion of the menu board instead of a speaker box, the additional landscape screen that they are proposing, as well as the requirement that they remove those 11 spaces along the property line, that would impact or mitigate the potential impact of that drive-through, as well as reducing the hours of operation. So for those reasons, we do recommend the reclassification as well as the special use. Sorry, I had more here. In addition, they are providing a direct pedestrian connection off John R. They are providing significant improvements to the building facade, and again, for those reasons, we are recommending that they receive the reclassification of special use. Because it's two separate actions, we are requesting that the Planning Commission consider this in two separate motions. The first would be to consider the reclassification. If they don't get the reclassification, the Planning Commission doesn't have the authority to grant the special use of the drive-through. So we are recommending the reclassification with the following conditions. The first is that the touchscreen board be required rather than a speaker box if this were to change to another drive-through use in the future. They remove the 11 parking spaces adjacent to the east property line, as well as the drive-through operation hours be limited to 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. in the evening. If the Planning Commission does recommend approval or does approve the reclassification, we are recommending special use and preliminary site plan approval with the conditions that they provide bicycle parking on site, they provide a landscape plan percentage calculation, they add parking lot landscaping along the 15 row spaces on the northern property line, and they add a man door to the trash enclosure. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Carlisle. Any questions for Mr. Carlisle at this time? Mr. Tagle.
Is there a screen wall on the east property line?
Yes. Yes, in addition to the landscaping, there is a 6-foot-high screen wall along that property line as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Sandriga.
Question is, what is the parking on the east side, is that angle parking?
Yeah, because it's one-way circulation around the site, that is angled parking.
I wondered if the applicant, question for the applicant, if that's a problem, eliminating that many parking spots, or possibly could you do parallel parking in lieu of the angle parking in order to provide some parking? But I guess that's really a question for the applicant.
I mean, yes, it's a question for the applicant. Parallel parking would add a little bit more additional buffering than what they're showing as angled parking. But again, we do note that they're 16 spaces over the minimum requirement of the zoning ordinance.
And it seems as though every time I go to a fast food restaurant, there's never enough parking in order to go in.
So, yeah, Ms. Fowler.
I understand that there's really two other spaces there besides the subway, correct? And so...
Yes, that's a good point.
Businesses there.
So it's hard to see, but this dotted line is the division line between the subway and the future to-be retail tenant. The floor plans indicate this is 1 or 2 retail tenants. It's yet to be determined. The only thing we know now is the subway is going to be built. The future retail tenants, we don't know who they are at this point.
Right, but when you talk about parking spaces, you've considered the fact that you have actually more than one business there.
It's based on a square footage calculation, and so whether it's 1 tenant or 2 tenants, we base it on the square footage, which is the total, and that's how we get the number of spaces.
Any other questions this time? If not, we ask the applicant to come forward, please.
Larry Stavro. I'm just telling him who I am. My name's Ron Clisby. I work with TDG Architects, put together the plans. I'm here for Brian Gill, who submitted the application. He's the lead architect. We're at 79 Oakland Avenue in Pontiac. This is Larry Stavro. He's helping the owner probably be doing the building if we can get approved. And primarily, he's also owns several subways, so I may defer to him to some logistical questions about subway. And in answering some of the questions that are regarding, there were statements that were put together as contingencies. We're perfectly willing to comply with all of those contingencies. If I could make a statement about the parking in the back that we were just discussing, we did a calculation based on another use
The owner is in favor of getting another smaller restaurant that will, go with his. And we simply estimated a number of tables and came up with a greater number. That's in no way to say that we're in disagreement with what the planning department has calculated. We know that there needs to be a calculation because there's no tenant that's known at this point. But the owner would like to see those go in based on what we came up with, and he feels that it's perfectly usable for things like employees. I'd like to see them park in the back. One of the other contingencies, but I don't think it was really brought up, was what was the other one? Hang on a second, excuse me. Oh, the hours of operation. To be honest, Subway's not a powerhouse like some other drive-through situations. As stated, he sees 1 to 3 cars at other restaurants. He's got 8 other restaurants that use the same basic system. Those generally happen at high points. Lunchtime, early evening, starts to taper off. So you can understand that there's an argument there to be able to cut back on and close that at 8 o'clock. Honestly, it's also an argument not to do that because there's just not, as great a use at that point. So, unless there's any other questions?
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant?
Just want to
Yeah, Mr.
Just want to clarify the hours again. So you would agree to
9 to 10 p.m. during the week, and I believe 9 to
9 on Sundays.
9 to 9 on Sunday.
And 9 to 10 on Saturdays. And just based off of the numbers that we traditionally have, your peak operations in-store as well as drive-through will be from 11 to about 2 o'clock, maybe 2:30. And then you'll start seeing, the soccer moms picking up kids from school. The drive-through will generate a little more traffic, and it tapers off again right around 5 to 6, or either going to different activities that the kids may have. The idea of the drive-through is really not for everyone running out for lunch and grabbing lunch. It's based on what we see in other locations. You see multi-orders coming through from, kids' meals and 6-inch meals and milk and chips. So we know that target audience that's using the drive-through are parents. And, again, by dinner time, it tapers off by 8 o'clock. So you might be getting 1 or 2 cars between 8 and 9, and then 9 and 10, a total of 4 within that 2-hour period. But it just as a convenience factor, if you are open signs on, and to be shutting down that drive-through, I think it just detracts from the convenience of having it.
Mr. Rutz.
Well, I'm a little contrary to that. I'm thinking that if I'm living on the other side of that buffer, if you're going to have maybe only 3 or 4 people coming through there, why not cut it off at 8 o'clock instead of having it open and traffic running through there and people getting ready to go to bed?
I can agree with that, but the traffic flow is still going to flow through the back, whether the drive-through is open or not. There's no...
Go ahead.
No, in other words, because the one-way in and the one-way out, the traffic patterns are going to be so. If the parking across John R. is completely full, people they'll be forced to go around the building to park along the north end of the parking lot. So there's no way of eliminating the vehicles. And then having the kiosk is a touch screen, kind of what you see in a Panera Bread. You just punch in what you want. It prints up inside, and you pull up to the drive-thru and you pick it up. There's no actual communication or a speaker box between the employees inside with the customer at the drive-thru. So it's very minimal impact as far as what you are used to hearing at a drive-thru. We found that they're much more efficient, the order accuracy is greater, and the speed of getting customers through the drive-thru is improved. and, we're taking in consideration with the resident, and that's why we really push forward with the kiosk.
Sure. Any other questions for the applicant? Mr. Tagle.
What's your stormwater management plan?
I'm sorry?
Stormwater management, how are you handling your runoff on your parking lot in your building? Stormwater, rain?
Oh, we have a bioswale.
There's a bioswale scheduled for the back, behind the building.
Right, is it right?
In that pocket where it creates that L, is a bioswale.
And is that, I mean, again, I'm not an engineer, but is that going to store all, I mean, do you have retention on the site?
No retention or detention.
Have you engineered this yet or looked at, as an engineer, looked at this?
The existing system will handle the drainage system.
Pardon me?
The existing system that is there will be renovated and reused, continued use.
Okay, is the existing system, are you storing it in the pipe, or where is the stormwater being stored, do you know?
It's not being stored currently.
So it's just dumping right into the system?
Right.
Is that?
So this
Is the impervious area changing? I guess that's the question.
So there's although this is a multi-million-dollar project, it involves the reskinning of an existing building and the use of an existing parking lot, in fact, the reduction of asphalt on site. So they're utilizing the existing system and adding some other improvements like bioswales and things like that. So it is the reclassification of the site and the special use triggered going before Planning Commission. Were it not for the drive-through, this is by right, and this is a simple rescan and reuse of a building. So that's a long-winded way of saying they're using what's there, because the improvements are not significant.
And your point is that the impervious area hasn't increased.
Has not, in fact, it's decreasing.
It's decreasing, so there'd be less runoff, yeah.
Okay. Another point, I agree with the parking along the back property line, and maybe a compromise position would be to landscape it now. I don't know when you think, or when you're going to have tenants, and if you find out that you're short of parking, it's like land banking the parking, basically, and coming in at a future date and adding those back in if necessary. But again, we've seen this community is overparked for so many years, and what we try to do, and we did our master plan and redid our zoning ordinance, was like kind of dial that back a lot and try to get a little bit more landscape areas as opposed to the asphalt, oceans of asphalt. And then the last thing is your lighting. I noticed that you've got all of your site lights at 23 feet. That's pretty tall when you're next to residential. Now, I know they're cut-off fixtures. They're not going to spill light over on the adjacent property, but definitely people on the adjacent property will see those lights. And I really like to see those lowered down, even if it means adding a fixture to, especially with your A, B, and C fixtures. The other fixtures are on your building.
I don't see that as a problem if that were to be a contingency.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I don't see that as a problem.
Okay.
We could work that out.
Any other questions for the applicant this time? Thank you. I guess if we have any other questions, we'll call you back up. Any other comments, thoughts? Mr. Savana?
Public hearing.
Public hearing, we'll do that, yes. Open it up. Open up a public hearing for this item on the agenda. Anyone in the audience that wishes to speak? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the table. For further comments, Mr. Hudson.
I think the applicant convinced me that maybe my concern wasn't a real one. I was thinking of a speaker back there, and if we've got very few cars going back there, even if they're back there, and we punching like a computer screen, a touch screen, and I guess my concern isn't as much as I thought it was.
So I just had a thought about that, about the drive-through and about how this is unique and about the request and changing it from 10 to 8. And my thought was, if we actually, if the goal here is to actually reduce or eliminate noise, which option would create more noise? A customer just driving through that drive-through, staying in the vehicle, touchscreen, ordering, picking up the order, or a customer actually parking, getting out of the vehicle, closing the doors? If there are multiple employees, multiple customers, they would get out of the vehicle. There might be they might be talking, so there might be that kind of noise, chatting. So if this occurs actually at 9 or 9:30 at night, I think the option of a customer through the drive-through is more quiet because you still have the same vehicle. So as the applicant mentioned, you have the vehicle, it's a one-way traffic through that parking lot. That vehicle will drive by that residential property no matter what, either drive-through or they park.
I think you're right.
Yes, Ms. Cruz.
I think you forgot about the other customer that attends Athens or Troy High at 9:30 at night and drives through with his muffler system or his bass sound system up to the touch screen.
That customer will actually pull up and park. So the
Well,
question, if they
right,
open up the
but
doors,
if you're rolling down your window and you've got your jams going, and you know, that creates
That's a good
noise
point.
late at night or later at night for residents.
so I guess the question is, what's worse, rolling down the window and ordering, or actually opening
I
up
don't
the
know.
doors?
I'm just pointing out
Yeah.
that pulling up to a kiosk
Yeah.
minus a speaker isn't necessarily quiet. Can be, but it isn't necessarily.
Right. I guess it depends on the customer.
It depends on the customer. So, you know, who's most likely later at night to go run through Subway for snack time?
So this subway is pretty far from Athens.
Just call me devil's advocate.
Mr. Sanzica.
Question for the applicant, I apologize for not asking it. What's the average turnaround time for the drive-through?
So from the point of order, you know, by the time they pull in, they place the order, it's a minute and a half, and by the time they get to the window, the sandwich is there within 3 to 4 minutes.
So the kiosk is quite a ways up? There'd be like two windows or...
With the way it shows in the drawing, you have 3 cars stacking prior, you know, so the kiosk is the right on the apex of that radius, and that's the kiosk, and there's 3 cars prior to the pickup window.
So I've been to Subway many times. So at the kiosk, you could choose what additions you want.
The beauty of this kiosk is it's so awesome. You enter your phone number. It stores your cell number. It stores your previous orders. You can literally pull up, enter your cell number, and say, I want that same order. It will create a history where it's...
That fast.
That fast. I mean, you can pay at the kiosk. There's no cash exchange if you choose. You just slide your credit card in and done.
Interesting. Very interesting. So by
and the company that actually manufactures them here in Troy.
Is that right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Savana.
So the applicant provides 10 stacking spaces. That's because our ordinance requires 10 stacking spaces for restaurants. I'm guessing that if we let the applicant decide how many stacking spaces, they probably would not have 10. That's my guess.
You know, we had that meeting, and I kind of liked the idea that we did go with the 10 because it allowed us to bump out the curb there, gave us a little more greenscape, and it allows us, and hopefully that works out with the site plan approval, to put a drive-through device, an identifying device to direct our traffic. Otherwise, it became an issue. And, you know, yeah, it's a little more than we wanted, but it works really well for both, you know, the landscaping and the identifying device.
Any other questions, or are we ready for a resolution on this, or one of two? Start off with the first resolution, Mr.
Two quick
Faison.
questions for the applicant. So I think it was said earlier, you own multiple subways, so similar setup as this with the
We have a
touch screen?
similar setup as this at 17 and Van Dyke, where we have on the north end is the subway, and on the south end is a Great Clips. You know, but ideally, we would like to see another food vendor. There's a lot of offices. It just, we would like to see 2 food sources in that area.
And do you have others with the touchscreen?
Yes, we have 5 other locations with the touchscreens. On the corner of 16 and Van Dyke, that's a touchscreen. 14 in Van Dyke is a touchscreen. 12 in Van Dyke is a touchscreen. 32 miles not. And 17 and a half in Van Dyke.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Mr. Crane.
Just a couple thoughts on the parking at the back of the building. that it's adjacent to the residence. I could see that could be employee parking, and truthfully, if I was coming to eat at one of your restaurants, I would not want to park in the back because I've got to walk around the whole building just to get to the front door. So I would think those would be a quieter vehicles that would be parked most of the day by the employees. How many employees roughly would be there during working hours?
There are 5 employees at peak time.
So we've got 6 more spaces that'll be open.
Right.
Okay. That said, I don't see a lot of landscaping between, as far as the drawing shows, between the residence and the back of the building. I mean, we know there's going to be some kind of noise, be it from loud vehicles or I don't know what else would be there, but there's going to be some noise generated on the back of that building. And you've got a building that's basically a solid material. It's going to be a sounding wall. In other words, it'll reflect the sound back toward the residents. So I want to see something more. There's a 6-foot wall. That's not enough to, people in the neighborhood, sound goes over a 6-foot wall. I'd like to see taller conifers, some kind of fir trees that would be there year-round to help filter that sound level. Is there any idea of what you can do besides, you've got 4 trees shown and then a big empty space.
There's actually 8 trees along the back there. The darker trees at the bottom of the drawing is just the different landscape around the tree. As far as the type of tree, we can easily adjust that to add some evergreens if that's desirable.
Yeah, again, there's a gap between the trees on the north side, the 4 trees or 6 trees, whatever it is, and then there's those on the bottom. What's in between? What's the sound absorber?
So can you step up?
You're going to plant perennials there? Flowering perennials. Well, that's not much of a sound deadener. Okay, I'd like to see more evergreen type sound deadening at that property line between the residents.
That's not a problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts, comments, or are we ready to move on to Mr. Faison?
Question. So there'll be more trees, but the 11 parking spots in the back will stay, but there'll be more screening. So, okay.
One quick question. What is the width of that landscaping area? Good. You're thinking 10 feet? So there are trees. There are trees that can fit into that and not overhang the wall or overhang into the parking spaces.
Yes.
Could plant a lot of poplars. Of course, that's only.
Well, you don't want a tree growing into the neighbor's.
That's right. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, maybe. The column type cedars or something like that. I know they need trimming, but.
Just so you know, we have gotten awards for the city of Sterling Heights for our landscaping.
Okay.
We take pride in that.
Good.
Yes.
Glad to hear it.
I think we're ready for a resolution, if there are no other comments. Someone would like to move
Okay, since I talked about the cedar trees, let me get to.
So there's two resolutions for this.
Yeah, the first one is just for the A and the B, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So we'll start with the first resolution. Would like to move the first resolution?
I can move it.
Mr. Faison.
So that's the modification of the regulating plan, right?
Correct.
So resolved, the Planning Commission hereby modifies the regulating plan pursuant to Section 5.02G as requested for the proposed Subway restaurant drive-through east side of John R., north of Maple Road, 1686 John R., Section 25, currently zoned NN, Neighborhood Node C District, be granted from Site Type B to Site Type A for the following reasons. The proposed modification will not alter the essential character of the area. 2, the proposed modification meets the intent of the area. Be it finally resolved, modification of the regulating plan shall be subject to the following. Requirement of touchscreen menu board ordering rather than speaker box. 2, provide additional landscape buffer area on the east property line. And I think that's it, because we're not limiting the hours.
Second. Moved by Mr. Faison, seconded by Mr. Senzica. Mr. Savana.
Was the resolution for additional landscape area, or was it to provide additional columnar coniferous trees to provide screening?
That's what I'd like to hear.
So, to provide additional
columnar coniferous trees for additional screening.
Mr. Tagle.
I suggested a land bank approach to this because we don't know if that we're over parking this site by 16 cars now. And, really our purview here has been to try to cut down on the asphalt. Now, I know they've cut down on some of the impervious area here. But I'd like to, to consider, if they need the parking, okay, I understand that. But today, we don't know that they need the parking. And I would like to think that we look at this more of a, if you need it in the future, then you put it in, and if you don't need it, then all the better.
So, Mr. Savana, if this gets approved tonight without those 11 spaces, will they actually have to come before the Planning Commission if they get a tenant in there that's a restaurant operator or fast food, and have those numbers be redone for parking requirements?
If they're land banked, so in other words, if we make the Planning Commission says we're going to land bank them, then they'll remove them, replace with landscaping. But in the future, if there's a demand for the parking, they can by right replace the landscaping with parking. If they do not land bank them, we simply say tonight, eliminate those 11, replace with landscaping, and they get a tenant in the future that needs those spaces, they would have to come back to the Planning Commission for approval to put back those 11 spaces.
I guess I'm just thinking, no matter what we do, even if we land banked it, I can't imagine the applicant's going to have an empty shell there for 2 or 3 years looking for a tenant. Probably going to be filled in. Maybe we should provide for the parking right now instead of trying to land bank it with landscaping.
But the calculation was done considering that those vacant spaces be occupied. And we're still 16 over, correct?
So how the calculation was done was based on general retail. So if it wasn't a food user, it was a general retail, there's 16 spaces over. If the Planning Commission decides to land bank, what would happen is that they would have to prove when they get a building permit for that future space that the use is going to be a restaurant or whatever, which requires additional parking, which means they need to actually convert that land bank parking into actual parking. So it would be a trigger of the building permit requirement in terms of when and if they're allowed to put that parking in place. If they go we calculate based on general retail, if they have a general retail user, they wouldn't need the parking based on the ordinance. We wouldn't allow them to use the land bank parking. They would only be allowed to use land bank parking if they prove the need based on the future use as a restaurant based on a submission of a building permit. Is that clear how that is triggered?
I don't understand what he said, but I'll defer to
So we've had retail projects come before us where the applicant didn't know what the future tenant was, and then potentially it ended up being a food retailer, fast food. Tonight we have an applicant before us that actually is pretty confident that they're actually seeking to have another food type of service in that location that would require additional spaces. So we know up front that those spaces, there's probably a better chance that they might be needed in the future because the applicant is telling us that that's what they're putting in there. So
That's all we know. We only know what the applicant is hoping to accomplish.
Right.
And there's no, as I see it, there's no downside. We're not saying you can't have the 11 spaces. You say you have them if you have the need for them. Today, they don't have the need.
So the option to bank them would be, if you need them,
Mr. Abbott, if the planning commission did the land banking, the applicant could between now, today, and when they actually do the site build out, could find a future tenant for that, which may be a food user, and they can simply put the land bank parking in as part of the site development now. The land banking is really, as Mr. Tagle alluded, is a no lose from the city's proposition because it still allows the applicant to do it if they can prove they need the parking based on the future user, which we don't know who it is, for that particular tenant space. But if they go with a retail user, there are 16 spaces over parked based on the site plan that we reviewed.
Okay. So
just one question. Is that a common approach then that we take if a site is overparked, that we land bank?
It's a common approach. This city has taken that common approach, and it's a pretty common approach in planning in terms of if you're overparked a site, you land bank it. That allows flexibility for both the applicant if they need it, but also ensures that you're not over parking and using an impervious surface that you don't need.
Right. And the land bank would be then converted to green space. Those spots would be green space and landscaping.
It would stay green spacing until which time it needs to be converted to parking. But like I said, if they get a tenant prior to the site build out, they could put that land bank parking in as part of the original site build out if they can get a tenant proving that need that parking.
Okay. So I guess, do we have consensus that we can bring back that condition number 2 with removing those spaces? Do we need consensus on that? Or, I mean, it wasn't really, we didn't really vote, okay. Is that fine?
Yeah.
To eliminate those 11 spaces, but as part of a land bank then? Okay, that sounds
Shouldn't
like.
the person that proposed the motion agree to it in the second? Agree to it before?
Sure.
That would be
Mr. Faison would do that.
I agree with it.
And I do also.
Right.
Hopefully the applicant does.
Mr. Faison.
Do I need to read it again?
Read it again.
The whole resolution or just point number 2?
The finally resolved from that point. Be finally resolved.
Be it finally resolved, modification of the regulating plan shall be subject to the following. Requirement of touchscreen menu board ordering rather than speaker box. To remove 11 spaces along the east property line and land bank them and provide additional landscape buffer area to the adjacent residential property.
With the column.
With the columnar and conifer trees?
Columnar coniferous.
Columnar coniferous trees.
Perfect. Moved by Mr. Faison and seconded by Mr. Sanzica. And we'll take the vote on this and then we'll read the second resolution.
Good question.
What's that? Number 3.
We're just wondering if the hours of operation are in this motion or are they subsequent coming up?
They would be in this if we want to impose that. Do we have consensus to remove that item? Any?
I thought we did. That's why I didn't read number 3.
Right. That we did. Okay. So we have consensus to remove item number 3. The roll call, Ms. Sarnicki, please.
Mr. Krent.
Yes.
Mr. Zanzica.
Yes.
Mr. Tagle.
Yes.
Mr. Abhidian.
Yes.
Ms. Cruz.
Yes.
Mr. Faison.
Yes.
Ms. Fowler.
Yes.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes.
Motion passes, and now we move on to the second resolution. Somebody would like to read that as well?
I don't know. Am I up for my turn? Okay.
Mr. Krent.
Hey, let me just look it over before I start flapping my lips.
Before that's read, I have a question.
Sure, Mr. Tagle.
I don't know, I'll direct it to one of you guys. A man door to the trash enclosure, can you give me a little bit of an explanation as to what you're...
And it's a person door, just to let you know.
Who wrote that report?
Sorry. I should be general neutral when I talk about those things. Mr. Chapman, can we go to the site plan? So,
I mean, I know what it is, but I'm wondering, do you have any thoughts as to how to accomplish that?
there is room to put in a man door on the trash enclosure. We've required this in a lot of the recent developments to put a man door so you don't have to open the gates every time. But yes, there's room to put the man door on the side of the existing trash enclosure there.
All right, that's fine with me.
Okay, anything else before I start reading? Okay. Resolved that special use approval and preliminary site plan approval pursuant to Articles 8 and 9 of the zoning ordinance as requested for the proposed Subway restaurant drive-through east side of John R., north of Maple Road, 1686 John R., Section 25, currently zoned NN Neighborhood Node C District, be granted subject to applicant to the following conditions. Number one, provide bicycle parking on site, provide landscape plan percentage calculation, add parking lot landscaping along row of 15 spots on northern property line and 11 spots along southern property line, and then add a person door to the trash enclosure.
Moved by Mr. Krent and Mr. Tagle. Second by Mr. Tagle. Roll call, Ms. Harnicke, please.
Mr. Sanzica?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Abhidian?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Ms. Fowler? Yes. Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Motion passes. Moving on to item number 8 on the agenda, public comment for items on the current agenda. Anyone in the audience that wishes to speak to an item on the current agenda? Seeing none? Mr. Tagle.
I just remembered there was some conversation with the applicant about lowering the site lights, and I forgot to mention that when we were making our resolution. How do we handle that? Or do we? Has the ship
just
sailed?
John, we get them in a headlock.
Lowering the site lights, so after hours?
No, the height.
Site height.
The height of the site, the pole-mounted site lights that are around the periphery of the parking lot.
I see the applicant making copious notes right now. So, right?
No, yes? Lower.
Yeah, no problem.
18 feet good?
Less expensive.
Okay. 18 feet? Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Thank you very much for doing that.
Yeah. And we'll shield them along the property line so they don't walk.
Right.
It'll all be on the site.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just say that the petitioner's been very, very responsive throughout this project, so I'm fully confident that the next set of plans we see will comply with what we've talked about tonight.
Thank you. So moving on to item number 9 on the agenda, Planning Commission comments. I guess we'll start with Mr. Carlisle tonight.
We quickly went over public comment for items on the current agenda. I don't know if there was anyone in the audience that wanted to speak on that before you got to the planning. We quickly got off track because Mr. Tagle brought up the issue of the light
Anyone
heights.
that wishes to speak? Public comment? Okay. We'll come back to item number 9.
Thank you. I just want to welcome Ms. Fowler to the Planning Commission. I look forward to working with you. I know tonight there was a lot. This was a very detailed meeting, so I just look forward to working with you. So welcome.
Yeah, not all meetings will be this long, so hang in there.
The other line to you.
Mr. Frey. Mr. Sanzica?
No problem. Thank you.
Mr. Faison?
I'll welcome Dr. Fowler also. Looking forward to working with you.
Yep, likewise. Welcome, Ms. Fowler, and I think we all look forward to the meetings that are under 1 hour, so hopefully we'll get some of those next year. So, Mr. Tagle.
Yes, welcome. Hope you enjoy it. Is this your last meeting, Mr. Sanzica?
I think there's one in December, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. All right.
Chris. Are you looking forward to my last meeting?
I wanted to pay you a lot of compliments and kudos.
Thank you. I'll wait till next.
No, again, I will also welcome Dr. Fowler, and it's nice to see you here, and I hope you enjoy your time on the board with us.
Again, welcome. We know of your wonderful community service for decades, so thank you for joining our committee.
I'm looking forward to it.
As I told Barbara when we came in, this will be a tough meeting, but if you can get by this one, you can sit right in.
Ms. Fowler?
No comment, really. It's been a very interesting meeting, and it is interesting to see what kind of detail we really go through. There's a lot of good concern for the community.
Ms. Zarnicki?
None, thank you.
No comment? Then we are adjourned. Thank you.
All righty.